Not that we were talking about that, but
No, of course not. It's ridiculous.
I went to I had to take Chewy to the vet, my little dog, and he
That's
gets.
weird. I had a dog Chewy growing up also.
It's a good name for a dog because you get home and it's chewing on everything, and you're like, I was just gonna call him Chewy. But that's how he got his name, was because we still hadn't named him, and it had been a couple days, and he was a puppy, and he was just tearing everything up. And I said, "Geez, Chewy," which is also how my oldest son got his nickname Booger or Boogie, because like I was cleaning his nose with one of those suction things when he was like an infant.
Oh yeah.
And like a big ass booger came out, and I was like, "Geez, Booger," and then it became Boogie over time. But
There it is.
I had to take Chewy to the vet, and here's something that a lot of you young bucks don't know.
Mm-hmm.
When you get married, especially young single guys or young unmarried guys, is as you get older, you just stop paying attention to women flirting or even entertaining or even acknowledging your existence. And I've gotten to that point, and at a certain point you wonder, like, you stop paying attention to it, and it gets to a point where you're like, am I ugly? Have I gotten so old that I am no longer appealing to women, right? And then that'll hit you one day, and then you'll start looking for it again. You'll be like, I wonder if women are like still attracted to me, or if my wife is just like legally obligated to tell me I'm handsome and love me, because it's easier to just pretend to love me.
When your wife tells you here's the question I've had. When your wife tells you you're handsome, and you're wondering whether it's that they have to tell themselves that,
or they need,
you know what I
something
mean? Yeah,
from you.
it's not like they're telling me, but they're really telling themselves.
Yeah, they got to convince themselves somehow to sleep with you.
That's it.
That's how it is for me, at least. It sounded like I was attacking you. Like I was like, I know your wife has to pretend that you're handsome or whatever. That's not true. Jerry's a handsome guy. If I were a gay man, even if I was just a little less straight, perhaps, Jerry, you'd be at the top of the list.
If you were a member of government, one of the states that we were talking about off air.
Which one? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, and I won't repeat what we said about that gentleman, that kind, because I'm really trying to be a nicer guy when I'm speaking about people, at least loudly enough that a lot of people can hear. But if it's just me and somebody else in the room, yeah, we'll absolutely talk shit about public figures, and public figures specifically. But no, so this is the situation that I have run into. I'm at that point. I've been married for 15 years, happily, I might add, in case she's listening. But no, I've just not paid attention, and it's not been an issue. It's not been something that I've been worried about. Like, the last thing on my mind is like, oh, I got to make sure that like young women still find me attractive. It's just not something I have time for. Frankly, I don't have time or the money to have an affair, so I don't ever think about it, right? And the other day I was at the vet. And
look, if you're putting your hand in a glove, it's for a falcon, not for a lady.
No, not for a lady. Certainly not. The only thing I'm putting on my finger is, another, not a woman, not another woman's ham wallet. I was trying to think of the most offensive thing that I could. Arby's sandwich, right? Roast beef sandwich.
It's funny that you say that, and then oh, sorry.
No, because I'll forget. Believe me, I'll forget. We'll get off topic, and we'll lose track of where we were going. But this chick, right, at the vet, she's working behind the counter, right? And I had heard her talking to her coworkers. I knew what she sounded like. I knew how she was interacting with one of the other patients or whatever who came in, or the guy who brought his dog in or whatever. Like, I saw the interactions, and it just, none of it was registering until like later, because as I was checking out, she handed me the card with the appointment on it, and it said Chewy, and then it had like a big heart next to it. And then it had like just like very like hearts and shit all over it. And I'm like, well, that's cute, because I thought about how like this chick I knew from Best Buy. Well, I don't know her. It's not like she's a friend or anything. But this chick who often would check out at Best Buy, because there's not a whole lot of people checking people out at Best Buy. She would always draw a heart over the I in her name. And I was always like, well, I hope my wife doesn't see this, because she's going to think instinctively that there's something going on between me and this individual. And so I thought, I always thought it was just something cute that she did. Same thing with this chick when I saw the heart. And I was like, oh, it must just be some shit that she does with every card. And I just like walked away, put it in my pocket and walked away. And then as I was in the car and we were driving back home, I thought, she was flirting with me. And I didn't even realize it. Like, as I was thinking about the card, right? I was like, I didn't even realize it. Because, again, you don't pay attention to that stuff when you're old and grizzled like we are. And you're like, you know, you've got kids and you've got a wife that you've been with for a long time. You just don't pay attention to that. So, you know, all these chicks, these young girls who are, like, into dad figures, you know, they're having a rough go of it, right? You gotta feel for those kids because, you know, they want an older man because they look and they see the generation that they grew up with and they see the men that they grew up with, and they're all garbage. They're, you know, basically they're people who wear skinny jeans and shirts that say Black Lives Matter. You know, and you know, pride flags and shit. Most of the people in their generation are gay. And so they see a guy.
Let's also not forget they may not actually have their dad. That's another thing.
That too, you know,
literally.
Yeah. Statistically, you're right. So they have these daddy issues and they want a dad figure. And they see a dad who comes in who's reasonably attractive. You know, I won't sit here and toot my own horn or anything, but I'll say I'm at least neutral. So when people see me, they're like, okay, yeah, that's a guy. And I know his dick works because he's got 3 kids in tow, you know? And he clearly takes care of himself. You know, I gotta throw that out there because I've been going to the gym lately. But, you know, and it wasn't just because of the card that I was like, that was like what tipped me off, right? I started thinking back to the whole interaction. And I was like, no, she wasn't flirting. Because, you know, you dwell on that after you notice something and you got to think about it. And I'm like, no, she wasn't. This is just a card that she wrote the shit on. And then, but then I thought about it and I remembered, because I remember her sitting there while she was waiting for the computer to load or whatever. It's a very old system, apparently, because it took fucking forever. But she's sitting there, she's like playing with her hair and like, you know, doing this shit and like, you know, twisting her hair around while she's waiting. And, you know, doing the little cutesy things or whatever. Not making eye contact. Very clearly, like, doing whatever she's doing on the computer. But, like, doing the thing with her hair. Her voice, the pitch in her voice changed. You know, just, like, all these little things that I started putting together. One on their own, it would have just written it off and been like, whatever. Had I even noticed it at the time. But when it all came together, and as I was driving home, I'm like, she was flirting with me. Which, unfortunately for her... First and foremost, I'm a happily married man of 15 years with 3 children. And like I said, I'm not financially stable enough right now to have an affair, nor do I have the time to commit to
It's good that you have that clarity.
Sorry. Yeah, I got to make it. I have to actually add these caveats in there because, you know, people will hear you say, oh, you're not, you know, you're saying all this shit about how you know, whatever, you'd never have an affair. Well, why? You know, well, here's why. You know, ethically and morally, I wouldn't have one because I love my wife. However, even if I didn't love my wife, I just don't have the money or the time to do it.
That's it, yeah.
But yeah, and I was like, but yeah, unfortunately for her, those things are true. But also, she had bangs. And I fucking hate bangs on women. I do. And it's just, yeah, wow. I know. I'm sorry. A lot of dudes are into that. I can't do it. And, you know, I'm just, that was her problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's where the line was drawn. That's it.
It was the bangs. I probably could have mustered up alone. And, you know, I could have freed up some time. But, you know, it was the bangs. Her haircut. It just
not for the bangs.
No, I couldn't do it.
You dumb strumpet.
I couldn't. Yeah. So, no.
There are those weird,
Go ahead.
I do know what you're talking about, actually, at least as far as, like, the specificity. You know, I'm no prize. You know what I mean? I understand where I am on the gravy train totem pole, or however you would look at that. And, but on the other hand, we all have our situations. You know, we all have our preferences, or however you would say it. Like, for example, Tom, has anyone ever asked you, are you a butt man or a breast man? Has anyone ever asked you that question?
All the time.
Okay. And how do you answer that question? You.
Oh, well, me personally, I'm an ass man.
Okay. Well, here's how I answer that question. They need both. I need
disagree.
both. No,
I disagree.
No, you can't disagree with my opinion.
Nope, but you're wrong. Your opinion is incorrect.
So first of all, if they don't have enough of an ass, then they poop out of their vagina. We all know that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So then,
that's a given. That's a scientific.
So we all know that. Yeah. And then we also know that if you don't have a certain size boob, then you could be kicked out of the female society. I've heard that. That wasn't even me. I've heard that from women. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, to me, if, like, okay, let's say a woman has nice boobs, but she has a butt like Hank Hill.
Okay. So non-existent, yeah.
Right. I can't. There's something. It just shuts up. My brain just goes, nope, shuts
up. Well,
that
to me,
it's like a girl who has no lips.
Okay.
You ever seen that?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah. Right. I can't. It's like, all right, maybe you're really nice. You smell that. Whatever. Everything else is. Oh wow. And then I see. Oh, or how about this? Your gums are larger than your teeth.
Oh no. Yeah, that's a no-go.
You've seen that, right?
Man.
So to me, first of all, there's no way to just blanket say, oh, I have to oh yes, if you have breasts, then I'm in, or whatever. Like, I don't know any guy.
Anyone's asking, Jerry. I don't think anybody's asking.
No one's asking anymore. Thank you.
No, they're still asking for sure. But what they're not asking is for you to go without entirely. Like on the video game character creation screen of life, they're not saying you only have 10 points and somebody's putting all 10 in boobs and 0 in butt. They're saying at least, because I can go with a 1, right, in a boobs. I can deal with that. Okay. I can't do with the 0 because then it's almost like you're fucking a guy. Like a young Asian boy, and you don't want that. But then also the butts, I could, if they've put, like Megabit here, he said, if you put like 8 into soul and 1 into boobs, 1 into butt, can you do with that? I think so. But again, I don't think anybody's asking you to go 0 on any one category. Does that still preclude you from accepting a woman with a 1 butt?
Yeah, I still can't do it. There's no, I can't. I'm sorry. Like, so I'll take a 3. No, can't do it. See, this is the thing. I'll take like a 3 and a 2, or something. Okay, like maybe I have a higher standard. See, I'm 6'5". Tom, how tall are you?
I'm 6 foot regular. 6 foot flat. I'm dying 6 foot.
So I'm not saying I have huge hands, but my hands have to feel like it's the same, basic version of what you were saying. You're like, well, I have to make sure it's not like an Asian boy. Oh, yeah. Well, right. So then, and I'm sorry, but like look, maybe a B cup works for another man.
Hands. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I'm not saying there are certain things that are just a no-go, and it has to do with degrees. You can't have a 1 butt, maybe a 3 butt. I don't have much of a butt. How am I going to judge that much? Sure. But you know what?
Do you have a 3 butt, Jerry?
I have probably a 3 butt. My wife laughs at it all the time. And I think we did actually say at one point that my butt was, do you remember the episode with Hank Hill where they were he had the pain when he was riding the tractor and they got him the implants?
Butt cheeks. Yeah.
Right. She was like, yeah, I think you kind of have the Hank Hill Plus prosthetic. Like, it's not an actual good butt or anything, but like it's now a little, like just a cute butt. Like a girl would make up in their mind that somehow it's not just a depleted, cavernous butt. Instead, oh no, there's this little, it's like just a little apple in there. That's what I hear. So that's fine for her. But for me, I'm like, well, if I had my butt on a woman, it'd be a no-go. I'm just,
I think that's just a man not having a butt versus a woman not having a butt is 2 totally different animals, right? Like, of
course,
you wouldn't say to a man, "Wow, you've got some birthing hips on you," and I find that attractive, right? Like if I saw a guy with birthing hips, I'd be like, "Well, you're just like a fat guy," right? It's not like, but if you see a woman with birthing hips, you're like impressed by that, and that's certainly like a primal instinct that comes that's over true. You where you're like, wow, I like this. Me likey. Me likey.
Right.
That's the primal
long time
attitude.
And when I say long time, yes. And when I say long time, I'm talking at least 45 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, best.
I'm gonna hold out real. I'm gonna really hold out. Yeah. By the way, I like our audience for many reasons, but I just want to throw out there that I'm looking in the chat as we're discussing this, right? And here is the like, you think like, oh, you get kind of a hive mind when you get on a show. People kind of have a lot of the similar. And then I look in the chat and it goes, oh, the soul. Oh, megabit. Oh, the soul. Oh, now I feel like a jerk talking about boobs. And then I look down, and then it's Mike. Make him laugh in public, and they'll scream in bed. It all works. Okay, now we're getting back. And then,
in business.
Right, and then next thing after that is the furthest away from soul, which is a pulse, and I'm in. And so it just went 1, 2, 3.
He was like, the guy who accidentally hit the switch on when he was doing his character creation. He hit the switch on pulse. And then hit enter twice accidentally, and his character came out looking like the pale kid on American Dad, but it has a pulse, and he's like, "Well, fuck it, I gotta do this because I screwed up."
That's it. I mean, you're
He's
here.
Got a pulse marginally, and then also Stephicus here, which sounds like a Roman emperor's name, and I have to make it a point to say something about her every time because she comes into the chat. We got to talk. We got to say good things about our one female viewer. But she said that sometimes it can be inflamed gums. Now this is somebody who was in the dental field for 11 years. It could be inflamed gums, which I believe she was talking about. Remember the P Diddy lips or the P Diddy gums that you were talking about?
Well, yes, exactly. Right.
Dolphin teeth is what Dave Chappelle called them.
Now here is my answer to that. Okay. You could give me this. See, I don't know if she thought she was helping or hurting, because she could have been talking further shit, right? But if you were trying to help, I just want to lay it out there that your attempt to help was to say that there are people, specifically in this case, women out there, that neglect their teeth so much that they become inflamed and engorged to the point that they are larger than their teeth. And therefore, I should forgive their negligence because they wouldn't be like that if they cared more.
Well, here's the thing,
that,
Jerry.
You know what I mean? Like that's where I'm like,
this is a
if
very
she won't
complicated.
Floss her teeth.
No. It's a very complicated character select screen. Okay, when you're creating the perfect woman,
goodness.
You have to also those 10 points that you get. You have to also factor in dental hygiene. So a lot of people leave that at 0 because they have to put stuff like pulse. You want to at least have 2 there, right? You want them to live. And 2, I think, is the bare minimum. Which reminds me, when you're talking about your bare minimum for a butt is a 3, that to me is a 0, right? You've got to reset. It's almost like resetting one of those little clickers. You're restarting it at 0. So again. So we're
3. Only getting 10 points?
That's it.
Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because when I said, I want to clarify for the room. When I said a 3, I was going on if you were going to rank each body part out of 10. In other words, for example, Tom has a 10.5 schlong-a-dong ding-dong.
It's true.
All right. That would be out of 10. They're grading over. They're very excited. They're happy about it. Okay. Now, on the other hand, because you're carrying such a monster beast on the front end,
it's possible disc disease on my back, which I wish I would have gotten. I wish I would have factored more points into my back strength, right?
See, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So then I was saying if you had a 10.5 in the front, you can live with a 3 in the back. That was what I was getting at. Not out of 10 would I give 2 or 3 points to a butt.
Well,
if I knew there was 10 points only, I'm rethinking this.
Yeah, you got to.
There's a lot to deal with. Yeah, there's a whole
right.
God.
Yeah, because you don't want.
Yeah.
That's not the area. I mean, it's one of many areas you're not going to want to leave at 0 or 1 even. You want them to have decent looking toes, so that you can go out to the beach together and walk in the in sunset. You can't take her. What are you going to do? Take your girlfriend who you hope to propose to a beach and she's got hobbit feet or whatever?
Could you imagine you get on one knee and she stabs your eye with a toenail?
Gross. Yeah, you've got to give her at least 2 there. So already you're at 8. You've only got 8 left, and we haven't even focused on the butt, the boobs.
Could you imagine soul, personality,
right? Soul, heart, pulse,
teeth, dude,
dental health.
I know.
You've basically given 1 to everything, at the end of the day, that's why there's no hot women out there anymore, because we're limited on points. They used to give you more points, if I recall. No, I knew a chick a long time ago who didn't have a chin, like her chin.
Oh.
It's not like she was deformed or anything.
Tom, that's deformed. What do you mean?
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, it's not like she was like had some kind of, not like somebody dropped a TV on her when she was an infant and crushed her jaw inward. She just the way her face was structured, it like instead of coming out like a chin should, it went in. And like and then up. Wait. It was very weird. It's hard I have to draw it for me to to give.
Do women in the all right, so we have one woman in the chat, so I'm gonna throw this out there. Because this may be the only, and maybe if you're a dude who knows this, then you probably have a wife who watches it or a girlfriend, so I'm not even going to judge you because I know it. I'm bringing it up. There's a guy on 90 Day Fiancé, Ed, and he had some kind of neck issue where essentially his neck started to degrade. So he was normal. Like in high school years and stuff, he had a real neck. But then over the years, he just started going like this. And he has to turn his whole body to look left or right. So I'm asking, does everybody know what I'm talking about? And is that maybe what Tom's talking about? That their chin just suddenly melded into their neck, which melded into their kind of clavicle.
No,
and therefore...
this was a different thing. It wasn't like she was... No, it wasn't like she was... I don't know. Here, I drew a picture. Let me...
okay,
let me see
let's see it.
I'm hoping this
we should have had this
good.
on the last week when we were doing the cop thing.
So it kind of looked like that. Like it sucks in.
Huh.
The wrong way.
So it goes down and... Yeah.
And in. But then she also had like... I mean, I didn't do a good job because you got to recognize that like the neck also starts kind of in that area. So, I mean... Right. We used to joke that she needed a chin prosthetic, like a fake chin, and then we thought about how funny and absurd it is to have like a fake chin. Of all the prosthetics that you could, there are people who legitimately have issues for mobility. They need like a prosthetic arm to like just look normal in public, and so they don't feel self-conscious, perhaps, or. The robot
or it's not
arms
the same hand that they eat with that they have to pick their ass with. I mean, think about that.
Well, not if it's like a you don't have that problem with the chin, like a fake chin, right? So
no, you were saying other prosthetics, like the person with the arm. Obviously, I would personally have filed for an insurance claim to get another arm simply to not have the same arm wipe my ass.
I'm curious, Jerry.
And then how do you wash your hands?
Well,
you're doing a one arm, you're just
with one.
squeezing the soap.
No, there's the saying, one hand washes the other. You would use your prosthetic wooden hand. Right,
no, I'm saying without one.
To wash.
You know what I mean?
You don't wash your hands when you only have one.
Well,
you wash your hand. Yeah, and the S would be in. You know what? Like this is the kind of world that we live in. That like it says employees must wash hands, or please wash your hands.
Oh yeah.
Or wash your hands. Whatever. There's somebody out there who doesn't.
Just one person.
And that's how it is. That's how it always is. He's missing an arm. He lost his arm. It's never the vets either, because the vets aren't, they typically don't complain about their situations. But it's like the person who has, they lost their arm.
At the McDonald's drive-thru.
Yeah, they lost their arm because they were trying to hand somebody their bag from the McDonald's drive-thru, and then like the thing closed on their hand and it was cold and frostbite. They lost their hand. This person happens to have blue hair and like zippers all over their that don't do anything on their clothing. They're non-functioning zippers. And these are people that like we just don't care for these types of people because all they do is bitch and complain. And this person who lost their hand in a terrible McDonald's incident, they now see this. Please wash your hands, or employees must wash hands. It's always with an S, and they get triggered. They become they become the fish mouth girl with the red hair that was like, "Did you just assume my gender?" They become her every time they have to go take a shit on duty when they're at work, and so now we have to introduce to cater to this one person who lost their mind over it and wrote a suicide letter and killed themselves because of this bathroom hands situation, plural hands. We now have to put hands, but we have to put parentheses around the S, right? Because you don't want to exclude anybody who only has one hand, but also you want to make sure that people who have two hands are washing both hands. So like, because you can't say wash your hand, because then people with two hands are going to be like, well, I'll just wash the one that I scratched my nuts with while I was pissing. I don't have to wash the other hand. So whichever one is probably
I do
dirtier,
admit, anybody who's working at a job where you would require that sign would actually struggle if you had two hands with the sign that said wash hand, because then they'd say, well, here I am working at this prestigious employment situation. For example, cashier at a gas station, and excuse me, I should say assistant to the cashier at the to the cashier at a gas station. You solely are trusted to use the rolling hot dog machine. That's it. That's as far as you've got.
Big responsibility, Jerry. I don't know.
You can't even do
playing that down.
You can't even do cigarettes or lotto yet. It's just the rolling hot dog thing. And so then you go in the bathroom, and you know, like you said, maybe you rub your nuts. Maybe you.
Who doesn't, right?
Sure. Yeah. Women, I hope. But again.
Well, it's 2022, Jerry. You
That's
cannot,
right. I know.
You cannot exclude the women from nut scratching. All right.
Yeah, that's true.
Scratching their nut, parenthetical S. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because they could just have one.
Just have one. You don't want to trigger the
which
person
was
that
taken from their Adam's apple. And wait. Oh, dude, could you imagine if that person exists? Could you imagine? All right, imagine this, right?
I hope that person doesn't exist, Jerry, but time has made fools of us all.
Someone goes from, all right, I'm going to take my Adam's apple out so I look more feminine. And then they hold on to it like a trinket. Like, I know there are people, my cousin did this. I thought it was weird. I don't know, for those of you who have kids in the chat, and Tom, please tell me. But I had a cousin give me ceramics. When they found out, as like a nice thing for when that's that party that you have before a baby. Why is my brain party?
a bar mitzvah.
And bat mitzvah.
Well, that's for women.
No, yeah. Well, I had a baby.
What if you were like a Mexican Jew? Like, how are you going to have a bat mitzvah and a quinceañera?
Curious how many people would be invited to everything? Holy shit.
I don't know. That's a lot going on.
I mean, and I can't even. I don't want to say any shit that's gonna get us in trouble. I have so many things because I would be like, all right, you're at the bat mitzvah, right? And then you have a bunch of Mexicans picking up the chair, and then you have to ask, is the help trying to clean up too early when we've rented the hall till 7, or are they with the party? Because they're all wearing funky suits.
My question,
we don't
Jerry,
know.
Is now since you've done something, since you've done a racist, I have to do a racism.
Sure,
as well.
Yeah, please do double time. Yeah.
When they're at these bat mitzvahs / quinceañeras, quinceañ mitzvahs is what I would call it, or something like that. There's got to be a name.
Yeah.
Right? When they're at these things, do you suspect a Mexican Jew would wear like an enlarged yarmulke? Right? Or would they wear or would they wear like a sombrero-sized yarmulke? Which one is it? He cried, for he did not know.
Dude, I'm gonna go with. Here's what I hope for. Obviously, I don't know, but here's what I would go for. And fingers crossed. I'm putting one up to the man upstairs. If you could make it so like they're Orthodox, okay? So when they have the hats just as much as the
Pinatas.
The little tiny hats, right? So they have the big hats and the curly cues. I'm hoping Mexicans, curly cues, and instead of the regular black felt hats, miniature sombrero, but still black felt. Black felt sombrero.
Would they also wear like a poncho with the Star of David on it? With Hebrew writing?
Dude, that'd be so... All right. Yes. And then instead of... and I've seen this quite a bit in my area.
Megabit has confirmed it was the second, which I believe was the tiny sombrero.
Oh, no. So I also am going to say, rather than, because I don't know if you've seen this in your area, but
there's no Jews or Mexicans here. My wife is the only Mexican in this town.
There's a common thing up here, and you can't say they're all Mexican because they're offered so many places and you don't know, but there's a theme with like a Spanish, Hispanic community, whatever you would call them, and that is that they fit a lot of people into a very small car.
I've never heard that one. I've never heard that joke.
No, I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
I don't get that trope. I've never heard of such a thing.
Really? Oh, okay.
No,
I can't tell. You're sarcastic.
That's totally a thing. Like, which is interesting.
Well, on the back of that car, there's a lot of times the shocker sticker because class. Could you imagine? You're like taking your girlfriend and her 3 kids and your 2 kids out to a very fine restaurant, and you just have the shocker sticker on the back of your car. It's incredible. And then you get your mom out and your dad. Anyway.
Well, yeah.
I just
plus
imagine...
your girlfriend is also underage, because let's be real here, right? The Hillside Traces
exactly.
weren't exactly dating like women their age. They were focusing on the girls who had recently had their quinceañera mitzvah. Right?
Yeah, dude. Here's what I'm thinking. Instead of the shocker, it's a. Why am I brain farting on so much, dude? What is the candle thing? For Hanukkah? Is it just I don't know what it's called.
It's called not a dreidel. Gosh, why am I?
You know what I'm talking about, right? With the 8 candles.
Yeah. It's called the menorah.
Yes, thank you. So instead of the shocker, you do a menorah with 1 lit candle. You know what I'm saying?
Or with 1 missing. Like you take
or 1
out.
missing.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe 1 missing. It's the 7th day of Hanukkah.
This is terrible. But you know what I never see, Jerry? And you, I'm sure you've probably had more experience. I know where you live, there's far more Orthodox Jews or far more Hasidic
I had Orthodox Jews come up to me and tell me I looked Jewish.
Well, did you do your DNA test yet? Have you contributed to the next pandemic? By doing your 23andMe? Okay, you're probably Jewish then. You're probably Ashkenazi Jew. Everybody is. I'm not. I somehow managed to not have any Ashkenazi Jew.
Wow.
But my wife did, and which was interesting because I have a great deal of German in my ancestry. Like half of my ancestry is German, and hers some of hers. It wasn't like a whole lot, but some of hers was Ashkenazi Jew. And I said, I don't know how we've made this relationship work this long, because if our ancestry and history is any indicator, we should not have gotten along. But so you know what I've not ever really seen is Jews driving cars, because I was going to make a joke about how the Mexicans fitting like 14 people to a car.
Sure.
And I was trying to think of like, oh well, surely there's a joke I can make about Jews driving cars. But I don't think I've ever seen a Jew driving a car. I understand that they do like Volkswagens, which is kind of ironic.
Which is also ironic, yeah.
I've never seen one driving one. I've just heard the joke. So I'm curious, like, what are the jokes? Are Jews good drivers? Like the Chinese, we know the Chinese are not good drivers. We know that Mexicans and Puerto Ricans, they stack a lot of people in their cars, and they've got proud to be American stickers on the like bumper stickers with a Puerto Rican flag on them, which is kind of interesting to me. But whatever.
It's really contradictory, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm happy that one of our territories that the Puerto Ricans are welcomed into us, just like the Guamese, the Guams. I don't know what they're called.
Guamisans.
But anybody who's born and welcomed into the United States, I'm all for it. But it's always been interesting to me that it says proud to be American, but I'm always like, it should say lucky to be American, quite frankly, because it saves them a lot of trouble. Then again, nothing against the Puerto Ricans. God love them. They contribute a great deal of like, you look at Puerto Rico and you're like, wow, we don't have it so bad here, do we? Like when you look around Ohio, you look at Puerto Rico, then you look at Ohio, and you're like, it's really not that bad.
Yeah, it's like they have wonderful beaches, but
But that's about it. If you go 10 feet in from the beach, you're in big fucking trouble. But other than that, Puerto Ricans love them to death. Now that we're done doing the racisms, Jerry, that was all.
Are we? You didn't actually let me answer your question about the Jews driving.
Oh, you have? Okay, yeah, I forgot that you whenever I go out to my grandma out in New York, she lives like by a lot of Hasidic Jews, And all I ever see is them walking everywhere, like everywhere.
That's the rule. Yeah, that's the rule. So it depends on the level of Jew you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? So if the Hasidic Jews are out, they're out because they're walking. They wear the same. They're very Amish almost in the sense that they have, you know, the black felt hat, but then that hat translates into a big dark black coat, and they're always wearing. Yes, very much. It's like if you met a Russian Amish dude.
Hasidic Jew. That's it. And so, yes, if you're talking about them, then their car is their feet, which their uncle made their shoes. Right. Yeah. Now, on the other hand, on the cosmopolitan Jew, are you in a city, or are you in a town? Because in a city, then it's cabs. Sure.
Probably not Ubers, because those cars weren't meant for this. At least there's the plastic in the taxi. Something like that, you know, separation and whatnot. So there's that. Or public transit, of course. You know, in like, say, a New York City, for the last 3 people left who haven't been beaten to death by certain people we can't talk about on YouTube. But then you have, let's say in my area, they probably, if they have vehicles, if they have children of young ages, they're driving Subarus, because that lets you know that they couldn't necessarily afford a Volvo, but they wanted the safety and snootery of an Oregonian to tell you how much they care about their kids in just a vehicle. You know what I'm saying? So, but if they don't have a vehicle, then did they get a good deal on a high-end used car? Because that's the only way they'll spend that money, because they know that that's a depreciating asset, and the money really goes into making sure their kids go to a good school and or a nice neighborhood, of course.
You know what really cracks me up about these Jews? All right.
You were very... Now that we're done with the racial stuff. Anyway, you know what cracks me up about these Jews?
Hold on, I got a thing for this.
Oh boy. Tom has the last statement.
Yeah, no. So here's what cracks me up about the Jews. All right, I'm not as anti-Semitic as the next guy, right?
Sure.
But I do recognize that there are some interesting parallels or whatever that are worth exploring. However, my attack right now has more to do with like. It has less to do with like just straight up anti-Semitism, and really it's kind of like, hey, you guys, you're not that far ahead of us, you're not that high above us, okay, come down, settle down, right? You know, because you hear that a lot. You hear about the Jews, you know, crying foul
IQ levels
every little, not even that. You hear about them crying foul over every little thing, and how like, oh, we've been oppressed so much, and you know, you guys wouldn't understand down there on your level of like you getting by without being oppressed and shit. It's a very interesting dichotomy the Jew has, right? Where they're like, yeah, we're super oppressed, but also we're fucking better than you, right? You know, so it's like, and don't you dare confuse these two things. But I'm thinking like I hear these stories of, and you'll never hear of, you'll never listen to an adult Jew talking about their childhood favorably, right? They never talk about their childhood, no matter how old they are. They could have been from like the old country, right? They could have grown up in Bronx in the 1920s. They could have grown up in suburban Wisconsin in the 1990s. They could be growing up right now, and they're still going to talk about. They could be 8 years old right now, and they could be like, you know, oh, we've had it so rough, you know. You'll always, no matter what your backstory is, you could have grown up with no legs, getting sexually molested by your uncle your entire life. But don't you dare tell a Jew that, because they'll tell you, oh, you think that's bad? Well, when I was a kid...
It's the Family Guy. Yeah.
They will always one-up you, no matter what. But here's the thing. They've never had a good childhood. And I think back to, like, some of the... If you listen to their stories, because you're like, oh, well, gosh, what was so bad? They'll say, oi, the anti-Semitism was so crazy, even from when I was just a boy, when I was in elementary school. Oh, they used to haze me something fierce. and they'll go on. And you'll be like, okay, well, tell me about it. Tell me about the hazing. Tell me what happened. Tell me about this bullying that went on. And they'll be like, oh, they used to take my lunch money, and they would give me a wedgie, and they would push me in a locker. This happened 2-3 times as a child, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Because the same exact thing happened to me and every other child on this planet, but they'll sit there, and and this is how you catch them. You ask them to elaborate, because you're like, oh, anti-Semitism, that's alive and well in this modern world. I'd love to hear more about it. And then they say, let me tell you. Or even as an adult, I've been passed up for promotion so many times because I'm a Jew. It's because of my yarmulke. They see my yarmulke. And then you go, well, so this promotion, what was it for, right? Like, what were you trying to do? Oh, I was trying to take over the CEO's position. And you're like, well, do you have a bachelor's degree? No. Okay, well, the CEO is actually, you're not even close to qualifying for that job, right? So it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It has to do with your lack of understanding of the world around you. And that is, historically... I encourage you. I'm telling you, I really encourage people to listen. Just listen to these people and ask them. You don't have to shit on them or whatever, which I know is the going trend or whatever with a lot of the folks that I tend to congregate with. Is to notice you notice that the Jews have an unnecessary or an advantage over us because they have this what's the word I'm looking for? They have this link among fellow Jews of oppression, and the oppression frankly doesn't exist, right? So they're like, oh, when you go to a frat house and you go through the hazing, you go through Hell Week, that's this fraternity that you've built, right? And you have this thing with these brothers that you can associate with one another. Soldiers, you're bound in blood, you're bonded in blood. Literal brothers who are bonded in blood. You grew up together. You are, whatever. Any other number, police officers who have been in shootouts together. These are firefighters who go into a burning building together. These are things that you're forged into a brotherhood. The Jews are forged into a brotherhood of lies, right? Of oppression, of false oppression that typically doesn't affect any of them. I can think of
modern day. Sure, that's true.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. There was probably some degree of anti-Semitism in the past, and we understand that the Holocaust was whatever the actual number was. We understand that it happened, and there were some Jews who were killed, and there were some gays and gypsies and whatever. But we don't see that same level of, oh, boo-hoo, woe is me, from the gypsies, the gays, and to some degree we're seeing that with the gays now. But
well, don't forget, Tom, the reason is because...
differently abled. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing, Tom. The gypsies, they finally got their restitution. I don't know if you know this, but they finally received their restitution in 3 ways. One of which was early on. That was in the 60s, when Cher, of course, famously sang favorably about them in her song, Dicks, Butts, Gypsies, and Thieves, or whatever it was. That one. And then, of course, that we lead into the 90s, when Johnny Depp still had a favorable career.
Yeah.
And he did the movie Chocolat, in which he portrayed a non-filthy, stealing, stinking gypsy. Yeah. Okay.
Rare
he did not
to see that sort of portrayal.
He just suddenly lifted a woman up off her feet, and they ate chocolate sensually, and it didn't matter that he was stealing her shoes while they did it. It was fine. And it was a very lovely portrayal, making up for years of oppression. And then, of course, finally, the TLC romp real-life documentary series, My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. And I believe that show ran for 88 seasons, something like that. It was a very, very...
Can I express my disappointment in you that you completely forgot the 1990s classic Aladdin, in which Robin Williams played a gypsy who granted 3 wishes. Yeah.
You mean a genie?
No, that's a common misconception, Jerry.
Wow. Now, see, that's why I missed. I had no idea.
No, now you know.
Wow.
All right, so here's the.
That is why he killed himself.
Yeah,
my goodness.
because he played a gypsy.
He saw that Will Smith was going to become the new gypsy.
Yeah. Well, who wouldn't kill themselves knowing that Will Smith was going to replace them as the gypsy, the blue gypsy. All right, so welcome to the chat, Chris Rose, new reigning champion. The new champion is taking the belt, I think, from who knows who it was, Jacob or Mike. I think it was Mike. King of Jordan, Mike in Manitoba, J Dubs, Efren Flores, Megabit Banshee, his wife Stephanopoulos, and then I would be remiss if I failed to mention the superfan who is listening at home.
Oh yeah,
and maybe listening. I don't know. We've said a lot of hurtful things about the Jews, and not that he's a Jew, but well, I guess he is some Ashkenazi Jew, and we did say some hurtful things. But then also to a friend of mine who always listens. He makes it a point to tell me that he's listening to the podcast because where am I at here? Because nobody else does, right? So he always sends me a screenshot saying, "Hey, I just got through the Betaverse one." He's like, he showed like, and it's not just that he shows, "Hey, I am listening to the show currently," and like you can see the tab like way at the beginning. Like he'll skip forward to the very end, like to where he's got like minutes left, and then he'll take a screenshot and send it to me and be like, "Hey, I'm just check out guess what I'm watching." So thank you Ben, for for always tuning in. And he was upset that we didn't talk about the Dietlov Pass on the last episode, and I said, "No, we've already done the Dietlov Pass." I said this was a similar circumstances, but different situation.
We had other ways to make fun of that poor girl situation.
Yeah, well, and he said, "Well, I'm sorry, I didn't read the whole title." I said the title is literally like the shortest part. The shortest thing that we do is the title. And at a certain point, you stop reading the "you had me." You just read the latter, however many words or whatever. This was probably the longest title. To be fair, "You had me at Dietlov Pass 2, Return to Opus Dei," or whatever the fuck it's called. Bernie Sanders and Kamar Devin or whatever.
Right. Yes.
But yeah,
exactly.
so I guess I can't really blame him. That was a longer title than usual. Jerry, did you want to talk about the whoopsies?
Yeah, sure. We can certainly get into whoopsies here on the program. Now, Tom, as you know, I collect whoopsies every now and again to share with everybody. First of all, for those of you
from all over the world,
I collect them from all over the world, and I hope that people appreciate them. If you're not following us over on the Telegram channel, you should, because that is where I see there are 6 subscribers, but I only ever see Tom and I bantering, and we have to also tell each other that it's us, so people don't get confused, but we're merely talking to ourselves. So literally, I'm getting a message from what would otherwise be attributed to myself, and it's Tom telling me it's not me. So if you could, if you guys want to interact,
I don't want the people reading the things to think that you're talking to yourself, like laughing at your own jokes. So I do the -T for you more than anything, just to just to be clear.
That could be funny though.
I'll just let it go from now on.
Jerry's fucking on one right now. So, okay, I'm going to throw a couple of them out there really quickly because I think it's just a good old LOLs, all right? Real quick LOLs. Tom, you've been asking, with all these little whoopsies, put a few faces to the situation, right? You've been kind of saying, let's have a good LOL at some actual just individuals. So, first things first. American comedian Heather McDonald collapses during a show after her second joke on stage. Tom, what was the joke? Here it is. I'm vaxxed, double vaxxed, boosted, and flu shot, and shingle shot, and haven't gotten COVID, and Jesus loves me the most. And boom, she fell. Fell and completely passed out, and went to the hospital. And they won't say what that was about.
From what I understand, she broke her head, didn't she?
She fucked it up pretty bad, dude. Yeah, she free fell, and she's not a small woman. This isn't 5'2", and she's fat, so maybe there'd be some if Roseanne Barr back in the day fell, there'd be there's less chance that her head would hit the floor. This woman,
she ate it.
Thinner, taller, and ate it hard. then speaking of fat women, Stacey Abrams. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, before I go to that,
Governor of Georgia.
right. Before I go to that, actually, I should mention Bob Saget. They finally admitted what his cause of death was. Did you know this, Tom? Did you know this?
I don't. Go ahead.
Yeah, they said it was head trauma. Now, I'm not trying to bring that up directly after saying that a comedian fell on stage and smashed her head, and it's probably because she got the shots. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying
we would
that,
never allude to that.
No, and I'm not saying a mere week before on his podcast, Bob Saget had said he had just gotten the second shot. I'm not saying that, okay? So I think you should just shut up and enjoy Black History Month, you stupid ass.
Yeah, hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, so now speaking of which, Stacey Abrams, okay. I don't
Speaking
know
of fat women, speaking of Black Lives Matter, speaking of gap tooth hookers.
That's it. So Stacey Abrams posted a statement on Instagram in response to a viral photo. Have you seen this viral photo, Tom?
I did.
You did? All right. For those of you who don't know,
please describe it in great detail. Like, what are the children wearing?
Right. So there is probably a good 30 people, 30 kids in the room. There are adults in the back. And then up front in the center, looking like she just took a really relieving shit, is Stacey Abrams. Now, every single child in the room is wearing masks.
Yeah.
The adult bitches who let their kids go to a school that would A, be visited by Stacey Abrams, but also B, teaches them, are also wearing masks like a bunch of F-slurs. But Stacey Abrams is not.
Yeah,
no.
She was. Well, you know what's interesting about Stacey Abrams, and I have to point this out because I don't know if everybody is willing to say out loud the sort of thing that I would like to say about Stacey Abrams. Like, I know I'm the kind of guy who will physically attack somebody or attack somebody's physical appearance, right? Like, I'm that guy, and I don't expect you guys to all be that guy, but I'll be that guy for you. Of all the people, so like the idea of the mask is to prevent you from having droplets flying out of your mouth, right? And like hitting people. Like the thing with the mask is, and this has always been kind of a mystery to me, is why a piece of protective personal equipment would be designed to protect everybody except you. Like, why wouldn't you make an item that didn't require, because it requires the buy-in of everybody, literally everybody, to make it work.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you make a device that protects the wearer? Like, that to me seems like kind of the way to go. But I digress. If the idea of the mask, because then people started saying, well, okay, yeah, it's to protect other people. It's to protect your fucking grandma or whatever. Because you spit, you aspirate. And that was their excuse.
Yes.
Like, when you talk, you aspirate, and spit comes out, and it catches, and it stops the COVID. And then people are like, well, isn't, like, even the N95 masks, that means it breaks down to, like, the lowest 0.05 molecule level or whatever, like, whatever the unit of measurement is.
Yeah.
They say, well, doesn't it also escape through there? And they're like, well, yeah, but also, like, okay, just kidding. The masks are designed just to stop the big spit, right, from hitting other people. Okay.
Right.
So that's pretty stupid that we should have to wear this and we should require the buy-in of everybody because not everybody's going to buy in. Anyways.
Sure.
Most of us have teeth in our mouth, right? That are closed together. And when we talk, our teeth do a pretty good job of stopping aspiration when you're talking, right? Stacey Abrams has teeth that look like they've been pulled apart like curtains on a window, right? As somebody's embracing the morning air, like pushing those things open. That's what Stacey Abrams' teeth look like. And so when she talks, she whistles. I'm sure of it. She whistles.
Yeah.
And spit and chunks of food stuff fly from the back of her throat. Items that she ate 2 or 3 days ago are still working their way up and through this hole in her mouth, in her teeth, and hitting you. And she's the one in that picture not wearing a mask. She's the one who should be wearing a mask. Of all people, if anyone is going to wear a mask, it should be Stacey Abrams. I'm sorry, excuse me, Governor Stacey Abrams. Go ahead, Jerry, please Continue.
I have no respect. I don't care what you. I mean, you could say whatever you like. That's fine. And
all right. Well, let me keep going then. No.
Well, it's funny you would say, Tom. The phrase is "whistle while you work," but I don't think that that's something she's accustomed to. So
while you work,
just a whistle while you work. Now, Tom, have you ever heard of the notion, the mere idea, that the government would potentially try to hide things from us? Have you ever heard about that?
I've never understood that to be the case.
Really? Well,
no.
This one may shock you. Okay?
I've never been on what's this, Jerry? I've never been on a podcast about conspiracy theories for the last several years. Yep.
Yeah. No, of course not. So this will come as a shock to you then, Tom. I'm sorry, and I hope you are sitting down.
You know,
FDA. When you're not on camera, you could be doing anything.
I stand up as soon as I'm off camera. That's the first thing I do, is stand up.
People don't know this. He stands up and immediately puts his balls in camera view, and that's what I have to see while I'm doing my
program would actually be rated at a hard R, maybe NC-17, if like it showed both of our cameras at the same time.
Yeah, it'd be really bad. FDA deletes, then restores data showing increased heart inflammation for young men after the Moderna shot. I mean, I don't know about you, Tom. I can't believe they must have meant to hit enter, to publish.
Well, you would think, yeah.
And then, just boomer moment, hit delete for half a second, and then suddenly was able to re-upload the entire thing. I'm sure it was all an accident. And not at all them trying to cover some shit up. Also,
possibly Ben, can you repeat?
No.
I know what you said, but I want to. But it was so shrouded in a joke and sarcasm. I want to make sure that the people at home know what that report was. That was.
Oh deleted. Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, no, I will expound. FDA deletes, then restores data showing increased heart inflammation for young men after the Moderna shot. Quote. This type of transparency failure is exactly why many Americans don't trust the government and don't want to receive a COVID vaccine. Republican Rep. Clay Higgins of Louisiana said, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has restored a document to its website which reports that the rate of heart inflammation among young men after receiving the experimental jabs is far higher than previously understood. The move comes after the 30-page document which outlines the reasons the FDA granted full approval for Moderna's Spikevax on January 30th.
What's that spike made out of, Jerry? What was that made out of?
Oh,
wasn't it like AIDS?
It was. Yeah, I was going to get to that. That's the last one.
I'm sorry.
All of Europe and soon to be the U.S. is finding out that they got HIV. So, on January 31st, was abruptly removed from the agency's website without explanation just after the Epoch Times reached out to the FDA for questions on the data.
Isn't that weird how that happens? Like, you reach out to them and all of a sudden they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, so fucking weird. Very strange. Now, getting to what you were just saying.
Yeah, let's talk about the lead singer of Queen for a minute. And how everyone is going to have something in common with him.
Yeah, very soon. Well, first, Tom, I want to say this. In the United States, the homicide rate is 3 times higher on average in each state than the death rate attributed to COOF, and that comes prior to the new numbers that they're coming out with, which finally matches everything we've been saying for months. So just in case you were curious if they were concerned about your health, your kids are killing themselves, their speech therapy needs are up 300%, they feel more isolated than ever, and people are killing each other at a faster rate before the food rationing and before they have even fewer jobs. And it's 10 times higher in states like Louisiana, just in case you were at all thinking it was about your health. But anyway, but for your health, and again, it's very important to get to the HIV. However, The Biden administration is funding free crack pipes to promote racial equity.
I love that. I love, you know what, Jerry, and I got to jump in here on this one. My friend Chet.
That's fine.
My friend Chet, I've known him since high school, since I was a young buck.
Since you were on the pipe.
Yeah, since back in the day when I was hitting the crack pipe. The Joe Biden crack pipe. This was before Joe Biden, anybody even knew who Joe Biden was. This is after he wrote the crime bill, but before anybody knew who Joe Biden was.
Before he even knew his son was doing it. You know?
Yeah, before his son. Gosh, this might have been even before Hunter Biden was a household name. But no, we've known each other for some time, and he messaged me today out of the blue. And he was asking about the crack pipe. He said, so I wish I don't want to pull it up because it doesn't matter if I quote him correctly or not. He won't care. He said, did you get your Joe Biden crack pipe yet? And I said, no. I said, I live relatively close to the inner city of Cincinnati, close enough to where I can go there, and I've worked there in the past, but to where they'll be handing out the crack pipes. And so I look forward to the handing out of the crack pipes, because cleaning up the community and such, because I drive through that community, right? I want it to be like nice. I drive through there on my way to my, 5-figure job. The, gosh, it's terrible. Well, that's
do you think you're gonna? Do you think you'll get a collector's? Do you think you're gonna get that collector's?
Yes, and that's where I was going with it. Is he asked me? He said he was looking probably on Reddit. He didn't say where he was looking, and most of us deny ever being on Reddit, but I think that's probably where he saw it. Somebody said that they were looking forward to getting their Joe Biden crack pipe and then putting it in a shadow box, and he was like, and he said, I immediately thought to myself, Tom. Because that's exactly the sort of thing that I would do. And to be honest, to be perfectly honest, when he said it, I was like, that's a really fucking good idea. However, I had not thought of it. I had not thought about getting my own Joe Biden crack pipe. And so I feel a little silly not having, had the foresight to be like, oh, I need to go get myself a Joe Biden crack pipe. But, and put it in a shadow box, which is what I intend to do now. Now that you say it. But I said, no, I'm still waiting on my box of COVID tests, rapid tests that I requested. Because as soon as they announced that they were issuing the COVID tests, I requested mine for my family, because I'm going to open them and throw them in the river. And videotape
and see if the river has COVID.
But just because I'm a dick. It has nothing to do with like me trying to test the validity of the tests, the Chinese tests that we're getting, because that's where Joe Biden bought the tests from. It's just because I want to throw them in the river because I'm an asshole, right? That's the only reason I intend to throw it in there. Jerry, let's talk about AIDS. Let's talk about these people and how they have AIDS now.
Tom, I believe there was a very, very well-known song by two popular writers and creators. I think we all know them. I don't want to give it away, okay? But it was the start of their masterpiece puppet movie. And the song was, everyone has AIDS. AIDS. Yes. So that was them mocking the stage play Rent. Well, warning, the MSM is preparing the public for an incoming AIDS outbreak. The COVID-19 injections are causing VAIDS, vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, just in time for the new release of an experimental mRNA HIV vaccine becoming available to the public soon. And here are 3 different articles to illustrate the point. Fast-spreading HIV variant doubles rate of immune system decline. Oops, that one's from the UN there. Oh,
wait,
boy.
Hold on. What is... There's a thing here.
Oh, no. Are we getting a warning?
Never mind. I forgot. Never mind. Keep going. I'll explain later. Off the air.
Free at home. Okay. Wait. I'm going to get to that one last. Wait a minute. Highly virulent HIV variant found circulating in Europe. Just all of a sudden. well timed with this. That's free at-home HIV tests available to the public. Just so you know, that one, guys, that's from the Columbia, Missourian. Just so you know, that's a little closer to you than Europe, Tom. And then, take
Missouri
the test.
is known for its AIDS, right?
What?
What a fucked up thing to say about Missouri, but it's true.
Yeah, that is weird, right? I mean, you can't hide the truth. Take the test, Brits. Urged to get take the test. Brits urged to get HIV tests as heterosexual diagnoses higher for the first time in a decade. So that is
Jerry, I'm embarrassed. Can I say why I'm embarrassed? No,
because you're a heterosexual with.
Because I'm a heterosexual with AIDS
without
now.
HIV.
You should be embarrassed if you're a straight male with AIDS. Shame on you, because that, you know what that means? It means that you had gay sex, and there's no denying it. And if ever I met somebody who, a white guy, now it has nothing to do with like, oh, black guys, you guys all have AIDS. It has to do with the fact that statistically black guys are more likely to have AIDS than white guys. Statistically,
I have no idea. I don't look at these things.
You have to. I'm telling you, when I went through EMT school, that was like one of the things that was really hammered home to me was like, hey, you guys got to take universal precautions, and here are the people that you need to watch out. And it wasn't like a racist thing. It was a, hey, here are the people statistically more likely to have AIDS, and it was gay.
Well, sure, it would be like
it was black men who have had sex with other men. That was like the number one. If you were a black man who has had sex with another man, you have AIDS. And it just statistically, that was the answer. But anyways.
Well, we know that Fauci appreciates certain people being a part of their testing,
loves a gay black
well,
man.
Tom, it's not racist. It's the same as saying, hey, look, if you pick up an Asian man from the back of an Asian restaurant, there's a very good chance if you have to try to tear the pants apart to deal with the wound, it'll have,
soy
potentially
sauce on his dick.
Soy sauce on his penis. Secondly, there is a very sharp set of chopsticks in his pocket that inevitably may stab you, and you have to be careful.
Can you imagine when I worked at a jail for a while, and even when I was an EMT? Because I worked at a jail for some time, and it was one of my favorite jobs. It was a very interesting job, and if you ever have the opportunity to work in corrections, I highly encourage it because it'll give you stories to tell. And I'm telling you, like it sounds like I'm being sarcastic. I mean, the job sucked some days, but I worked I worked nights, so I worked from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. And every night we sent somebody to the hospital because somebody got into a fight enough to where they had to be sent to the hospital. Very interesting job, and I highly encourage everybody, if you haven't, if the opportunity presents itself, take it, because it's such an enlightening job. It'll show you so much about the world that you don't know. Well, maybe you know exists, but maybe you don't believe it, or maybe you don't appreciate it. Such an interesting thing. But anytime we would intake somebody at booking, and we had to pat them down, and we had to get them into their new outfits, and their black and whites or whatever, or their oranges, depending on what color your particular jail or prison.
Your gang affiliation.
Uses. Yeah, whether their hat was on backwards or slightly crooked to the right. You had to pat them down, but you had to ask them the same questions that police officers asked them, and police officers.
Is there anything that's going to stab me, pick me, poke me? That thing, right?
God bless the police officers, because they always did a great job of making sure everything was out of their pockets. Now, in case they didn't, we still had to ask them, hey, do you have anything that's going to stick me, poke me, or jab me, or whatever? And anytime I patted down a Chinese person, or anybody Asian, because frankly, and I hate to say this because I'm going to sound like a racist, I have a hard time telling the difference between Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Chuck E. Cheese. I have a hard time telling the difference betwyn them. So
Chuck E. Cheese recycles their pizzas. That's how you know.
Well, sometimes you don't have access to their pizza program. But if anybody's eyes came in slightly slanted, maybe a little tighter than normal, I would ask them. I would ask them that same question. But then as I'm patting them down, I'm paying a little bit of extra attention to whether or not They have chopsticks in their pocket. And believe it or not,
no, you didn't. No,
I'm telling you, 1 in 10 still had chopsticks in their pockets. Jerry, listen, 1 in 10.
Their fortune cookie. They had the fortune cookie in their pocket, and it turned out if they had only opened it before doing what they did to get to prison, they would say, "Don't." Like, the fortune said, "Don't leave the house today."
Right. It says, make good decisions." Right. Like that was what the fortune says. And if they would have read it, they maybe would have.
If they had only not. They always tell you eat the cookie last. No, what if there was poison in the food in front of you? You have to.
You never want to. Yeah, you got to eat the cookie first, because sometimes it's hey, your waiter is a serial killer, right? Or your waiter is a psychopath, and if you don't eat the fortune, that's how you know. Is if they bring out the fortune cookies last, that's when you know they were trying to hide some shit from you, because there's some cooks back there with a typewriter whipping up some fortune cookies who are like, hey, be careful, the fucking hostess is, she's evil, she's a devil worshiper or whatever, and she'll turn you into wontons or whatever Chinese people do. I don't know. We recently ate Chinese food at this restaurant. We had never eaten that before, and it was.
Did they also censor you like the Olympics or no?
Not at all. No, very good experience.
No kidding.
I know you probably thought I was going to say something really racist about the Chinese, because I normally do. But the Chinese food that we ate here was very, very good. All right, Jerry, are you out of whoopsies? Are we out of whoopsies now that everybody has AIDS?
I will I don't think I could top everybody has AIDS and free crack pipes for everyone.
Get your crack pipes, guys. Come on.
Yeah, those are both frightening and real, but frightening but also funny, right? Because I feel like we're living in such times that until someone is literally stabbing us in the throat for our last hamburger or something, that we're all going to think everything is out there and it's just funny. Like, say, for example, the people who took maybe one shot and they feel better than the people who took 2 shots, and the people who took 2 shots who won't take a booster.
Yeah, they only got
right, exactly. This is what I'm saying. That's someone else. Oh, I don't have a heart problem. You know what I mean? And then the food shortages. Oh yeah, no, they'll go to. Listen, I'm good friends with my neighbors, and they're all old. They're not gonna break into my house and kill me. No. That's totally fine. This is, I feel like, this attitude that people have. Like, you tell these stories about jail, and it was just brief, but in just hearing what you said, like, oh, they turned the lights out and someone went to the hospital. Like, literally just, we just turned the lights out and then everyone went to the hospital. Like, the point I'm trying to make is that those people, I want to remind everyone, were a good portion of them were let out because of either admittedly draconian weed rules, or B, they just said, fuck it, it's COVID, don't come back, please try not to rape anyone on the way out. And then they did, and then they said, all right, you get one whoopsie, please, we understand. Yeah, it's not like it immediately backfired at all.
Jerry,
but the point I'm trying to make.
Oh no, go ahead, please.
No, the point I'm trying to make is that I don't think I could top 2 both simultaneously hilarious in the dark humor sense, but also like amazingly horrific at the same time.
Let me tell
like, literally,
the
government
Jerry.
is handing out crack pipes after nearly handing out forcefully things that have given everybody AIDS. So, I mean, if that's
the people who didn't get AIDS from the vaccine are going to get AIDS from the needles that they're handing out, the crack pipes.
That's it.
You know what cracks me up about all this, Jerry, is like, we had Trump, and I saw, this is not like a joke that I made. This is somebody else made the joke, and I'm just stealing it and repurposing it. There was a comment about how Trump, and I'm not crazy about all the decisions Trump has made, and I've explained to my oldest son recently, because he and I were talking about politics. My oldest son, he's 12, so he's like getting to that age where he's kind of like, I gotta know kind of what's going on. But he knows that we're Republican-ish. Like, we are people who tend to vote Republican. We don't consider. I have now made that clear. I'm like, I'm not a Republican. I lean Republican because I share a lot of views with Republicans, but I disagree with a lot of policies that Republicans make. But I'm not a libertarian because I also, like, I have opinions, right? And that's like something that libertarians don't have. But I say, no, I say, hey, we vote Republican more often than not. Certainly more than we would vote for like ultra liberal people. But he had said something about Trump. He said, oh, Trump, if he runs again, I'm so excited to vote. Like he was just like ready for Trump because he knows how like into that agenda I was, right? So he was like, Trump. He's like, we're going to vote for Trump in 2024. And I said, no. I said, freeze frame, a record scratch. I said, Donald Trump has to earn my vote again. I said, he's not getting it for free because I voted for him before. I said, he's in a position right now where I'm neutral towards Donald Trump. I think he did a great job at the things that I needed him to do in his time in office for the most part. But he has made some decisions not necessarily towards the end, but he has made some decisions during his presidency as well as after his presidency that I disagree with. And he's going to have to earn my vote again. So, that's, as
it should be. I mean,
and that's
anybody, really.
But that's the problem that we see with a lot of these people is they're like, vote blue no matter who, right? We're going to vote for whatever. I said, if somebody comes, I don't know, if Governor DeSantis comes along and says, hey, I'm going to run for president or whatever, I'm going to hear him out. Honestly, I love Thomas Massie. I think he's a really good congressman, not because he does great things, but because he's willing to fight, and he's willing to take certain beatings that other people probably wouldn't. But he's not really accomplished anything. Right. And it's unfortunate, but he's willing to go to bat and he's willing to make some of these, but he's made some decisions in the past that a challenger, Claire Worth is her name. She has come along and she said, I disagree with these decisions that Thomas Massie has made. And I plan to run on a ticket more aligned with Donald Trump's agenda. And at this point, I like Thomas Massie. I've met him before a couple times. I think he's a great guy. I think he's got good principles and values. But I also think that this chick, Claire Worth, and you know how I feel about women in any kind of office or any kind of position, working position. I don't think they belong there. But I think like if she's willing to kind of go a more conservative route than Thomas Massie, kind of like leaning towards that. So I'm actually like on the fence in the primaries, which is something that old people do. You young guys don't have to worry about the primaries. Cause I didn't when I was a young guy. I didn't give a shit about the primaries. I was like, I'll just vote Republican or Democrat and that'll be that. But we old folk, we tend to like pay real close attention. Like, oh, there's a upcoming election for the comptroller or whatever. I got to get involved in that. That's the sort of shit that we do. But let me tell you a story real quick, Jerry. And I know I've told this on the show before, but I'll tell it to you briefly. The thing I like about working at the jail is, and like I said, the overnight shift, kind of people are like, they sleep most of the day anyways. It's weird with jail and in prison is they're up at night and they're down during the day because it doesn't matter. Because all they do is they sit in the same room with no light. Even when they go out to rec, typically it's it's whatever. And it's like 8 hours between shifts between us. So, and Mike is in the chat already calling me out because Mike, I do have the shot prepared. I haven't taken it yet. But it just doesn't matter to these guys. So for whatever reason, nighttime, they all like turn into werewolves or whatever in jail. And like at nighttime is when they get real active. And these dudes like I said, I speak just enough Spanish to where I can do conflict resolution or whatever. And to where they're like, wow, this white guy, like he knows Spanish. And plus I was like a decent guy to them. I wasn't there were a lot of corrections officers who would like talk that would like treat them like shit because, hey, I'm a deputy and a deputy jailer. I can do, I can treat you like shit or whatever. But I'm like, me, on the other hand, I was like, well, you got to understand part of my duty description is that I have to tend to your welfare and take care of you guys and make sure you guys aren't hurt under my charge. You guys are all under my charge. Whoever is in my ward that I was assigned, you guys are under my charge. And I have to make sure that you guys see morning, right? Like I have to make sure that you guys see the next
right.
head count, right? And so that was my thing.
It's a good goal. You know what I mean?
I mean, if that's your goal, if your job is just to make sure that adult males survive, like it's a great job, which is what I did when I was in the Army too, which is why they put me on the murder block, the maximum security. Like within 2 weeks of me being there, I ended up in the murder block is what they called it, which was all the murderers and the rapists and the serial assaulters and shit, like the really violent people that nobody really wanted to deal with, and people accused of terrorism and like very like horrible. Oh, they stabbed the shit out of a deputy jailer. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and put him in this. So they put me in that area or whatever, and you were on your own for 8 hours. They were like, all right, good luck, and you'd go and you'd do your checks every 20 minutes. You'd make sure everybody was where they were supposed to be and that nobody was dead is essentially what you're supposed to do, and make sure that they clean their cells and shit. Which it was great. It was a great job. But you also had to do, like, you were in charge. If you were in charge of the maximum security, which was 2 blocks, it was the maximum security plus the maximum security advanced segregation. The advanced segregation was like people who were in an 8x8 cell by themselves, and they were like inside of a room, inside of another room, inside of a hallway, inside of a jail, inside of a bigger building, right? So I mean, like, they couldn't go anywhere.
My goodness.
But you had to go and make sure. And some of the people, like, those people were great. Those guys were great because they were, and it's funny because those guys were super only because nobody wanted to work the murder block until you worked the murder block. It was like the best kept secret, because once you worked there, everybody there knew they belonged there, right? Like, they had tattoos of swastikas on their neck. They had like the teardrop tattoos. They had the 666 across their forehead. Like, they were like the guys who like belonged there, and they knew they belonged there. They're like, you got me. I murdered my mother, and they were like willing to accept that. One guy specifically, I remember, he was there because he murdered somebody, a drug dealer, who had sold somebody in his family like a hot shot, killed the kid. This guy went out with his buddy. They found the guy, killed him, chopped him up, and then buried him all across the, like, multiple counties. Like, they buried different body parts in different counties or whatever. And like, I would go and I would peek in, because you had to like open the thing and peek in on the guy and make sure he was okay, and then you could close it and go on about your day. But he would just sit in there and he would read nonstop. He knew he was going to prison forever. Like, there was no way he was getting out. And we would have to take him to his visits every Monday. He would go and visit. His dad would come in to see him every visitation, and I would take him, cuff him up, give him the you got the handcuffs, the ankle cuffs, and then the adjoining wrist cuffs. And he would march, no problems, down to his little visit with his dad, and then march back to his room. And he'd say, "Hey, can you turn on the light so I can read?" And that was it. And so you'd have those guys, which was cool. And that was the great part about working the murder block. But then you have like general population, and the sort of bullshit that you imagine from jail is what you experience in general population, which is where you start out with until they determine, okay, this is a guy we can move to, I don't know, booking. We can put him in detox. We can put him in charge of the kitchen, or we can put him in charge of the murder block, whatever. They put you in Gen Pop, and Gen Pop is like 3 wings of 200 and some odd people. I think 270. Anyways, almost 300 people, and it's like 10-man cells, and you just literally every hour you walk down your wing and look in, make sure everybody's still alive, and then you go on about make sure nobody's cornholing anybody. And that was it. Very easy gig, but everybody is a total bitch in general population. I would say, well, let's say 90%. 90% of the people are total bitches. And hey, welcome to the chat, mostly Wave. But 90% of the people were total bitches, and they were there because, and who can blame them? Because they were there for child support, right? Or, some non-violent thing, or maybe a marijuana possession or a DUI, some non-violent thing that they got picked up on, that you're like, okay, you don't really belong here. You're a waste of taxpayer money being here, but whatever.
Right.
But that is where most of the issues took place, just because there were so many people and there were 10 people to a cell. So anytime there was an issue, you'd all of a sudden hear the call on the radio. It would say, hey, emergency and 111 or whatever. And you'd go running or whatever. And it would be the control tower watching, and they'd open up all the doors so that you could run in. Brand new guy, brand new deputy. He was there. And I hadn't been there for that long. I'd only been there for maybe a couple months. And I show up. This dude is standing there like with his hand still frozen on the radio after calling control saying, hey, there was an incident or whatever. He's staring in the window of this cell, and like somebody had beaten the shit out of this other guy, and blood everywhere all over the cell. The kid is bleeding. His head is like gushing blood all over the floor. Everybody else is like hiding in their beds because nobody rats on anybody else in the jail, which is like inmate code or whatever. And you got to respect that because at least they have integrity. They're all sitting there in their cell. And so I show up. I'm the first one there after the deputy in charge of that particular block. And I get there, and I'm like, hey, control, open up 111 and outer door and let me in. I jump in there. Dude's still standing out there, and I forget his name. It doesn't matter. But I say, hey, man, get in here. Dude comes running in, finally, snaps out of it. And I'm holding this kid's head together, like the skin on his head. I'm pinching it together. And I always wore gloves because I'm a big germaphobe. So I'm wearing gloves. And I pulled out a pair of gloves from my duty belt, and I hand it to the kid. And I said, put these on. And I'm explaining to him what we need to do. I said, I need to get these 9 other guys out of here. And I said, and we need to get the crash cart down here from the nurses. We need to get this and this and this and this. This is how it plays out. This is the dude's first week. And so I'm holding this kid's head together while I'm trying to explain all this shit to the kid while he's putting his gloves on. And I say, now, this sort of shit happens every day. And the kid is kind of like staring blankly, and I have to hit him on the cheek because I'm like crouched down and the kid's kind of bent over. I smack him on the cheek, and I'm like, hey, man, come here. Like, I need to grab him I think I grabbed him by the ear, actually. I pulled him down, and I said, hey, this sort of shit happens every day. So if you're not prepared for this, there's the door. But until then, I need you to hold this kid's fucking head together. And so the kid comes in, and he pinches the kid's head together. The crash cart's on its way. And I grab everybody. I'm like, everybody out in the hallway. And you're supposed to have, it's like five inmates to each corrections officer. But I'm just like, hey, give me all 9. I pat them all down, and we head to the rec area. I split them up. By that point, somebody else came along and helped me divvy them up. But then we get them all separated into the different rooms so we can interrogate them. Finally get to the one kid who I thought it was, and it was a little Mexican kid. And I was like, in Spanish, I'm like, hey man, who the fuck did it? Or who was it? And he goes, I said, why'd you hit that kid? Or why'd you hit the white kid? And he goes, because he took my fucking radio. And that was it. And I was like, show me your hands. He showed me his hands. His hands had blood and cracks on the knuckles. And I was like, I got to take you to the hole, right? And he's like, yeah. And that was it. But I had built up a relationship with somebody from each cell, typically the biggest guy in every cell, because then I could go in there, I could do head count, and I could go down the line, and I could look at everybody and go, okay, yep, okay, you're there, and go down the line. And, I could get them all and make sure, and they would look out for me. So if there was a new guy who was like who was transferred from another prison who wanted to fuck with, the COs, and he was like, hey, I'm going to fucking slug this guy with the, cafeteria tray. The big guy, you'd grab him by the back of his scruff of his collar and pull him back, and he'd say, no, we don't do that. Not to Miller. Anybody else comes in here, maybe. But, yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about jail is, like, as long as you treat them with respect, they're, like, decent. They're just people who made a stupid fucking decision. And what's funny is...
may also continue to do so.
They may, and who knows. And that's not my problem. My problem is I have to make sure that they serve their time while they're there and that they are safe while doing so. And you know who was the best in the jail besides the murder block people, but the people in Gen Pop who were segregated from other people was the pedophiles, because they knew that they had fucked up, and they knew that they were in they were there because they're pieces of shit, and they were like the kindest people. Like if you went in there and you were like, hey, I need to do head count, they would like real quick line up and they'd be like, here's my bat, here's my wristband, here's this, sorry, somehow we ended up with extra silverware and it stayed in here, or oh, we accidentally ended up with an extra sheet. Like they were real quick to be like, hey, we fucked up, we're sorry. Because they knew, and just like the murder block guys, they were like, they knew that they were there for a reason, and but it's never the general population people, which to a certain degree you're kind of like, okay, I get it. Like you guys are here for some bullshit, like child support. You're behind on your child support and you got sent to jail or whatever, and you got to do your weekends. You come in or whatever, or you're here because you had a weed charge or whatever, which I disagree with. But I'm not a legislator. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I just make sure you guys are okay while you're here serving your time. But the Gen Pop guys, some of them were like real big pains in the asses, and that's just how it was. Let me do my shot real quick, and then we'll get onto the topic, because otherwise Mike is just never gonna let me live this down. You ever watch Big Herc on YouTube? Sounds like you've encountered some wig splitters in your day. Here's one thing, Mosley Wave, I still don't know if I know how to pronounce it. I have done every cool job that I wanted to do as a kid. I was a soldier, I was a firefighter, I was an EMT, I was a corrections officer. The only thing I couldn't do was a police officer, but it was just because by the time I got out of the Army, I was so fucked up I couldn't do it anyways. But yeah, like the risk, the excitement, that sort of shit is like awesome to me. And now that I'm no longer physically able to do a lot of that stuff, which is why I had to step down as a firefighter, was when I was diagnosed with MS from coincidentally a bad vaccine of the anthrax shot in Kuwait. Oh boy. Yeah, it happens. I know you're not allowed to say that anymore, but it happens. Sometimes you get a bad batch of a vaccine and you end up fucked up from it. When I was diagnosed with MS, and now I have to go every year and get tested for MS, I had to step down from being a firefighter because I didn't have to. I could have continued to do it, but because I have these injuries, I didn't want to put anybody else at risk. So in that way I did have to. But yeah, I've done everything that I wanted to do that I thought would be awesome. I've experienced a lot of really cool stuff, and I encourage anybody, especially you young guys, get out there while your bodies are able to do it, so that like later
before you die of AIDS.
Yeah, before you die of AIDS. Do it, because then you'll be able to sit on a podcast one day with your friend and talk about how you watched a guy bust his fucking head open over a radio. But what are we cheersing to, Jerry? To not having AIDS?
Yeah, let's keep it simple. All
right, to not having AIDS.
Here.
That was this week. Last week we did Lafroig 10 year. This is Lafroig Select. A little bit smoother than the Lafroig 10 years.
Okay.
Still an Islay single malt Scotch whiskey. Very good. Every bottle that you buy of Lafroig, you end up the owner of a 1 by 1 foot plot of land on Islay Island. Really cool gimmick. I don't know if it'll ever stick, but technically, since I own quite a bit of land on Islay Island now, I should be able to apply for lordship, I would think, right? Like you just have
with land. Your level of education now, that is Cape worthy.
Oh, hold on.
If we all recall. Yes.
Yeah.
No, you have to say what it is, and then
yeah.
You can't
the Master of Divinity.
Right, yes.
Right.
That's right. So now that you have a mastership, I think that should be, and a cape, a prerequisite to owning lots of land. And then you could, depending on where exactly this is, I would just as soon envision you in a Kentucky Fried Chicken guy, sort of leisure suit, sipping on a mint julep and a cigar, and then saying to yourself, because no one else is around.
No, I'm a loner, Dottie.
Yeah, no, it's nice to own land.
It is.
Nice.
On Islay Island, it's nice to own land. I don't know what it's like to own land here in the United States, because even when you own land, you don't really own
You don't
it.
own
You
it.
still get taxed.
No, you don't.
To high heaven over it.
That's
Jerry,
right.
What are we talking about today?
Yes. So we're talking about fermented socks, if I remember correctly. It was the Fermi. Fermi. Yes, it was the Fermi podiatrist sock. It's a type of sock that somehow, if you ferment it, will become a ghost, a spirit of some kind, of the person who once wore the socks, and they will tell you stories with no ending, and will bore you to tears. Exciting as the story may start out, it will eventually end up with them in the grocery store haggling over a price of something, probably. And that is what we're going over. Or I could be mistaken on the front end, or it is the Fermi Paradox.
Oh, yeah, okay. That sounds closer to what we were talking about.
Which I think... I mean, look, I'm excited about the first one, but if it happens to be the second one, I can hang in with that.
Jerry, I got a question, because what you said made me think of something else. Like, you have undoubtedly experienced this, and I'm sure people listening have experienced this as well, where you have entered into a conversation, and it's typically with older people, where you've entered into a discussion, and they just don't shut the fuck up. They don't, because they so seldom get the opportunity to talk to somebody, and so you respect
one's listening
them, right? Well, but you respect it because you're like, well, this is the greatest generation. These guys lived through some serious shit, and and they're going to be gone soon.
That. How about no one listens to me no one listens to me either, so I'll give them a break.
Nope, doesn't matter. We gotta, because our time will.
No. I mean, Tom, I respect them because. I mean, I have the attitude that no one respects us now.
So we gotta shut them down.
So I have to so I listen to them because I can't imagine how many years of no one giving a fuck about what they have to say have been like, because I'm 41, so I figure I'm probably on a good 5-year clip where no one gives a shit about what I have to say. You know what I'm saying? Because that mid-30s Jerry probably could still get someone to hear what he has to say.
You could probably get a vet tech secretary to listen to you.
Yeah, I could probably get a vet tech to listen to me and draw hearts on.
Yeah.
I was just writing down what you were saying, but it's just a bunch of hearts. I can't even.
You gotta I'm telling you, when she was playing with, because I thought about it, I'm like, man, she's she was. I remember thinking, because I was watching her, and I'm like, this is taking fucking forever. I was losing my cool, and at a certain point, you kind of have to draw a line where you're when you're gonna stop being cool about something. And I remember looking at her and thinking, this chick has a lot of piercings. And I happened to notice because she was pulling her hair behind her ear. I was like, she's got a lot of piercing behind her ear. And I was looking for anything to distract me from the fact that this situation had taken way too fucking long. And I was like, wow, she's got a lot of piercings. And, and then she's sitting there pulling on her hair down here, and I'm seeing she's got the septum pierced, and I'm like, she's got a lot of piercing. And I'm thinking of literally, but I'm like, I can't get past those bangs. Ugh.
Wow.
Right.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
I'm gonna keep attacking bangs. So but no,
I honestly hope that one day your dog has bangs.
He will never. I'll make sure that one day I'll wake up and Chewy will have bangs. I'll be like, oh, the vet tech got to you.
The vet tech got to you. That's it.
But no, I'm thinking though, we think about how these old people, they tell these forever stories, right? I did my time as a chaplain at the VA, and a lot of them are old Korean War vets, and some of them I got to meet a World War II vet one time, and they tell some stories. They'll spin a yarn, and I like listening to them because they've got some interesting stories. It's not like when we hear people our age who are you're not gonna believe this fucking thing that happened to me at the vet the other day, right? This chick, it's not like those stories where it's this story seems to drone on and on forever, and he's done a callback already to it. It's not like those. It's hey, back when I was a young buck, when I was 15, because I enlisted under false pretenses. I lied when it was World War II, and because that was the thing to do, was to lie and go and fight in D-Day or whatever. You know, like that. Those are the stories that you want to hear. But then sometimes they do go on a little bit longer than you want them to. And
just a bit.
Everybody's got a grandpa, or has had at one time a grandpa, or perhaps had a grandpa figure where you've heard them talk about something that just was not interesting to you, but you entertained it because you're like, well, you know, I love him. He's my fucking grandpa, or he's my, you know, uncle, and he's like a good dude, but he's you know, he fucking sucks at telling stories. But when you're talking about these ghosts that tell stories, I'm starting to wonder, like, what's the appropriate cutoff? Because, you know, for an old person, you're like, at a certain point, you got to be like, oh, well, I got to hit the old dusty trails. You know, you know how to, like, and they recognize, like, yeah, I've gone on a little bit longer than I meant to. What about a ghost? Do you think a ghost who's telling you a story that's gone on for way too long, do you think they recognize that, hey, yeah, it's time for me to put a pin in it, and maybe we'll talk next time? Or do you think there's like an easy way to cut off a ghost when he's telling a story that's gone on for too long?
Well, Tom, listen, you are a bit more of an expert on the subject of ghosts and the paranormal. So first question,
I'm like quick to hand it off to somebody else who's less interested in ghosts than I am.
No, well, here, if I'm going to solve this problem, I need a little bit of help from you. Now, do these spirits, do these ghosts, do these apparitions ever take solid form again? In other words,
no.
Are they never?
No, never.
Nothing.
Not once.
Okay.
No.
Because here's where I was going with this. I could understand if they don't understand, they no longer recognize time as we know it. Now it's worse than even an old person because time does not actually even exist. You see what I'm saying? So now my thought was, well, if you could give them a watch and then remind them of maybe when they had their little pocket watch in their pocket and they got it from their dad after they had some bubble gum and something like that. But if they can't physically put it in their coat pocket, cannot wear a good old Casio or something, then the only option you have is to let them haunt you in the same room with a really large digital clock and immediately say, you see that? Do you remember math?
Yeah.
Do you remember math?
X minutes.
You have 10 minutes to tell me this fucking story about the DMV, you know, or whatever it was.
Do you think ghosts are telling stories about the DMV? You think they're
Dude,
reliving some of their...
Dude, let me tell you something. Do you know, here's your question, right? Do you know people who just won't fucking let shit go? Because if the answer is they won't let shit go when they're alive, you absolutely best fucking bet. Dude, they finally have someone to listen to them. You don't think? Finally, someone's listening. They're going to go, you know, let me tell you something. I had this experience one time and I haven't fucking forgotten about it in 40 years. And however much time I've been dead, I don't even know.
I have no understanding of time, and this digital clock that you've projected onto the wall, Jerry, it's not going to cut it. All right, I got to tell you this situation that happened to me at the DMV in 2000. No, I don't know how to say double 17, because they're like a young ghost. They're an old person but a young ghost. Now a lot of people in the chat, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of chatter from the fan of the show. Stephicus said, this is my grandpa, he's the best. Everybody's grandpa has this situation where they'll like tell the same story. And then also Mostly Wave says, when my grandparents tell me the same story 5 times, I start to wonder if they're just messing with me. God bless them. And then Ghost Jerry Seinfeld telling you the DMV and airline joke. So, what's the deal with airlines, right? Here's the thing. My dad, it's so bad. Like my dad, he was 35 when I was born. He was 62 when he died, I think, and I was 20, whatever. I was in my mid 20s, or early 20s, I guess. He was old enough to like have met my middle son, and then that was it. And then he checked out. But he would do the same thing. Like he was very much like, you know that joke on. I'm not trying to speak ill of my dad. I love my dad. He's a great guy. But he said like that. The Heat, the movie with Sandra Bullock and Kristen. No, not Kristen. What the fuck is her name?
Melissa McCarthy.
Yeah, one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. I love that movie. Biff Tannen, he plays the fucking Thomas Wilson. He plays the chief of police, or the police captain or whatever. Funniest character in the show, in the movie, I think, because like he's so overlooked. He's like, I have a 6-year-old son, and he calls me grandpa, right? You know, like because he's just like the old grizzled captain. He's like, do you know how old I am? I'm 35. That whole joke runs through the whole movie, and it reminds me of my dad because he was very much like, as a 24-year-old, and he was in his 60s. You know, he was much older than I am, or when I was when he was still alive, and I'm literally the age now that he was when I was born. So I like to think that I have the edge on him because my kids are 12 and 10 and 7. And, I'm just finishing seminary, which he would have been finished with seminary shortly before his 35th birthday. So I'm like he and I are neck and neck in that sort of thing. But he would do this thing where he would tell me these stories the third or the fourth time, and I would hear him out. I would listen to him, and I would laugh, and we would make jokes about it or whatever. And sometimes I would make the same joke in response to that story, just to see if he would catch on. And he'd be like, wait a minute, I've told you this story before. He's like, you can tell me if I'm telling you the same story again. And I'm like, but, I thought it was funny the first time you told it. I still think it's pretty funny, but you think it's really funny now that you're telling it, whether it's the third or the 10th time. It doesn't matter. You still think it's funny. You still enjoy telling it. So I'm going to let you tell it, and we're going to experience it as if it's the first time that you're telling it. It doesn't matter to me that it's the 10th time I've heard it, or it's the first time I've heard it. If you enjoy it, if you take some joy out of telling the story, then I'm going to let you tell it as if it's the first time. So that is my recommendation.
Oh, that's nice.
And Chris Rose is here saying, I'm 44 and just had a second child. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So here's the difference between guys and gals.
I told you, I'm 41. My kid's not even 1 yet.
Yeah, here's the thing the difference between guys and gals. Guys, you can have kids until you're fucking 80, right? Women,
I've heard that.
That is not the case, okay? Women,
That's
your
true.
eggs will stop being good. Men, your sperm is good forever, okay? It never...
That's
like
true.
You could be on your deathbed banging some chick or whatever that you just met who wants your inheritance or whatever, and she'll have your kid, and it'll be your kid, and it'll be a healthy baby. This 20-year-old that you're fucking on your coma bed. It's fine. A woman, you do not. If you're like, if you're like a younger guy, and if you're Ashton Kutcher and you're trying to fuck Demi Moore to have a kid, don't do it. Stop it.
That's not good.
Go back and find yourself a Mia Kunis, because that Demi Moore, she's gonna give you a Down syndrome baby, and that's just science, okay?
Yeah, her baby would look like Bruce Willis. You know what I'm saying?
And that's the worst part. And you would never know, and you would be quick to accuse Bruce Willis because of this bald spot on the baby or whatever. You'd be like, I know Bruce Willis came in here and fucked you when I was filming that 70s show reunion. You would be like real quick to blame Bruce Willis, which who could blame you? Blaming Bruce Willis.
It's a very easy, suspicious place to go. You know what I mean?
Instinctively, I blame Bruce Willis whenever the opportunity presents itself. I'm like, something bad happens, some kind of like racist thing comes up, or some kind of comment about Sam Jackson being a dick or whatever. Like I'm quick to be like, Bruce Willis. All right, so let's talk about ghosts who with foot fetishes or whatever you said. The Fermi. Now here's the thing. A lot of you are like, holy shit, it's 10:50. You've got 10 minutes to wrap this shit up, Tom and Jerry. You're not going to be able to do it. Here's the thing. 1 page of notes, okay? Because I started school. I started my new job. Jerry's got a full-time job. We're both professionals, we have to actually wrap it up within the 2 hours. So if you're like 10 minutes isn't enough, we're about to show you how 10 minutes is plenty of time. And if you've been married as long as Jerry and I have, to our respective wives, not to one another, but if you've been married as long as we have, then you know that 10 minutes is way more than enough. So we're going to talk about the Fermi Paradox.
Did it twice and had a conversation in between.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the time that I was ranting about whatever one thing or another, Jerry snuck off, banged his wife, came back, and went back, banged his wife a second time, came back, and then I was done talking, right? So
in the middle, I did take the pee. Don't forget, you have to pee, because even men can get what do they call that? Urinary tract infections. Yeah. Still have to do it, everybody. Hey, got to get the pee in between.
You can never be too careful. And Chris Rose is talking about how it's 1:50 p.m. Thursday here. He's got all day. I assume Chris Rose, I think he's in Australia. I don't want to dox him or anything, as if Australia.
Oh, no.
If I say Australia, all of a sudden he's like,
a guy in Australia.
Motherfucker!
That fucking guy.
They tracked him down. Now watch, he's going to be like, no, New Zealand. And I'm going to feel like a real asshole.
Oh, it's even worse. Yeah.
I'll feel terrible. So the Fermi Paradox, this is going to be broken down into multiple episodes for the reasons that we already established. The Fermi Paradox, this first one is going to be about kind of like laying the groundwork for the Fermi Paradox. Then future episodes, the next 2 episodes will be talking about kind of like why, right? Because the Fermi Paradox is not some simple thing, as you're about to find out. It's a very like that episode of American Dad where like the Mike says that we're foreplay for the ears. That's where we excel. We excel at going down. We're not real great at the stroke game, okay? But look, he says I'm a Kiwi in Australia, so I was close. I was close with both.
Wait, a Kiwi in Oz?
Yeah, Australia.
Is that?
Yep.
That's what they call Australia? OZ?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Oz. Oh. Yeah, unless he's in prison. But I think like a lot of the Kiwis end up coming over to Australia. There's more places to go to, it's like Australia's kind of like your the bargain outlets, right? Like the outlet mall. Like you're like, yeah, I could go to the Walmart here in New Zealand, but why don't we hit the outlet store over in Australia, right?
Totally.
Why don't we hop a 310 to Yuma over to the mainland, and we'll we'll go ahead and
we'll go get some Asian food.
I'll tell you what, Chris Rose is probably doesn't even want to be in Australia anymore, but he's been there for 2 years waiting for an opportunity to go back and water his plants in New Zealand, because he's been on lockdown in Australia with all the the COVID.
Well, Tom, you know who he's waiting for, right?
Who's that?
I can't believe you don't know this. But Tom, when a bunch of New Zealanders are in times of war, times of strife, times of difficulty, and you make quite a trek, and you've earned the appearance, the Eagles come, and they bring you back home.
Well, yeah.
I don't know if you knew that.
Who was it lost the war against the emus? Was it Australia? I think it's Australia lost the war against the emus, the bird wars. I would never, I have a lot more respect for New Zealand. I'll say this. And it's, what's funny is like my
the Great Emu War, Australia.
It's Australia. Yeah. I have a lot more respect for New Zealand, and I'll tell you why. It was because of the flight of the Conchords. They were the ones, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I'm going to let you guys know a little secret about myself. I was like 23, 24 maybe, when I realized that New Zealand was off the coast of Australia. I had no idea where New Zealand was geographically. I had no need to know where New Zealand was. Like, it never came up in conversation. Nobody ever asked me, "Hey, do you know where New Zealand is?" It wasn't until Flight of the Conchords I had watched the series, and I was like, "Man, these guys sound a little Australian." And I hear there's like this conflict between the Australians and the New Zealanders, or the Kiwis, as Chris said. I hear this conflict, and that sort of conflict comes from like the same sort of conflict you would hear from somebody in Kentucky and somebody in Cincinnati, Ohio. Like somebody in Cincinnati who's like, no, I'm not from Kentucky. You know, they're like real quick to say I'm not, even though like we bleed one another's colors, right? You know, like I'm a Bengals fan because I'm like 10 minutes from the border, if even that, from Cincinnati.
Are you going to make a bet this year?
No,
are you gonna?
No. Listen, you got to understand this. The Bengals have never fucking done anything good, but
listen. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay.
The fact that they made it to the Super Bowl, that's impressive. And hey, we're like, hey, awesome, good job, Bengals. But I'm not like, you know, it's like when your kid fucking accidentally wins at tag football or whatever, and you're like, well, hey, we're super proud of you, kiddo, but like the fact that you won it this one match, right, or like this one particular season, having never been good at football ever in your life, and like the fact that the other team just happened to have two paraplegic kids on it, like, you know, like you see all that and you factor it all in, and you're like, kiddo, I love you and I know you're gonna do great and whatever it is that you do, and I will fully support you, but at the same time I'm not willing to put money on you behind the scenes, right? You know, it's kind of the same thing with the Bengals. I'm like, yeah, you guys did great. We're super proud of you. My kid was born in Cincinnati, which is why we're Bengals fans. Same reason why we're Packers fans, which is why we were like half and half. We were like, hey, the Bengals. And then we were like, hey, you'll get them next time, Packers. Because normally you do get them, Packers.
Well, here's the thing.
My other son was born in Green Bay. So, I mean, those are the only reasons that we're those fans. So
I see. Well, the reason why I was bringing it up was that if you're a little superstitious, if you're a little bit on the conspiratorial side, I have a little sneaking suspicion that the Bengals are in the Super Bowl in the Chinese Year of the Tiger for a reason. And so I would just say, if you think China has truly taken over and that there may be something to the Year of the Tiger thing, I believe it starts in February, and so a Super Bowl win by a Tiger team in America would be a more sort of not spiritual, but a way to secretly kick off the dominance of China in America within the Year of the Tiger kind of thing.
I have heard this. I have heard that the Bengals making it to the Super Bowl is part of a thing, but also I think that, you know, like Mostly Wave says, Joe Burrow is the great white hope. He is Joe Burrow. I mean, he's a young guy. Like, he's what, 24? And he's won like all the awards that you can win as a football player within this year, which is like really impressive. Like, it's a really cool feat to have accomplished. And I don't know. Like, I think there's something perhaps to it. I think that, you know me, I'm a superstitious conspiracy guy. So
this is where I'm going with this. This is what I'm saying.
Of course I think that there's something to it. And I've read some other stuff where like Tiger this, Tiger that, Tiger China, Tiger, you know, like all this stuff is kind of aligning perfectly to where I'm like, it's all scripted, and none of what we believe to be true or believe to be fate or skill or talent. I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that like our life is scripted. And if you think otherwise, you'd be wrong.
We're currently in an Asian Truman Show.
Yeah. And it pisses me off, Jerry, frankly, you know, like I like to think that I have some control over my life, you know, like it's the same reason I'm not a Calvinist, right? You know, you have like these Calvinist Christians who are like, no, I'm a Christian. I'm a Calvinist. I'm part of the elect. God selects who is going to go to heaven before they're even born. You know, this whole Calvinist bullshit. I don't believe that, and I will fucking fight any Calvinist because I think like you've grossly misinterpreted Scripture in this whole concept of free will and the elect and all that stuff. I think you have, and I will gladly go toe to toe with you and fight you to the death and see who's really elect. I will do that. And I train for that particular moment all my life. People think I'm training for the revolution. In reality, I'm training for the first time I encounter a Calvinist.
It's your internal revolution, really.
Yeah. Nobody knows that, but in reality, like, I'm in the gym, like, working out, like, fucking, oh, I can't wait for these fucking Calvinists to come at me or whatever. But no, I think I think it takes away a lot of your free will, and it takes away too much to where I'm like, no, I don't like that.
Did you also, can I ask you this just real quick? Because I know
fight Dr. Fauci too. Go ahead.
Because I know we are at the, we're at the mark. But have you thought about what the hell was it? Fuck. I just lost it. It was either Disney or Marvel. It was never mind. I can't even now. Shit. I thought I had it where there was another Year of the Tiger reference. There was another sort of something where I can't remember now what it was. Oh, in the television show Loki. Mm-hmm. Did you hear about this? Where
the show? Yeah, I'm aware of it.
Well, no, the show in it, it wasn't so much the Watcher. It was Kang at the end. And he was saying the entire show essentially is to let Loki know that while there are all these parallel universes and things like that, so there are multiple versions of him that kind of they have to control and whatnot. Essentially, that the Watchers and the Kang and whatnot, you have no free will because your story's already been written.
Yeah. In
the Marvel universe, so. Every heroic thing that you thought happened in the last 20 years, up to and including Infinity War and Endgame, were already predetermined, and the outcome was predetermined by Kang and whomever else. And that's why, like, the Loki trying to be this badass, whatever, and, it, like, you're already in trouble because you skipped out, and that's why you're in this purgatory situation. It's because your path is already this is why you do it all the time. This is why you fail all the time, because your story's already been written. You are who you are, and you will fail as you are, and you will succeed, whatever. It's already been written. And I remember how many people got pissed off because 20 plus years of Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you're telling us that our heroes, the people who fought and bled and all the kinds of things where you watch it and you get inspired or you cheer or cry or whatever it is. Nah, bruh. It's all stage play. Like, even in the idea that it's fake, in the world where it's supposed to be real, they're telling you it's not real even then, in a sense. You know what I mean? And it was very meta. And I just thought, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm going, wow, yeah, that's as depressing as when I saw it on the Marvel movie. And then there's the Marvel movie with Shang-Chi, and there's a lot of predictive programming about the Year of the Tiger and different other stuff. And then
I think you meant
here we are with
Bernie
the Bengals.
Sanders and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Yes.
Okay, so we had a question from a fan who's not watching right now, but he texted me.
Okay.
He's in an argument on Facebook, and he just sent me. This is a dude that I know, really cool guy. I really respect this guy. He beat me because he and I were kind of like really like neck and neck for competing in recruiting, and he was a better recruiter than I was. I'll admit that. But I would never have admitted that to him at the time because I surpassed him. Like, he was still a recruiter, and I went to assistant center commander. I was selected to be assistant center commander over him, and then center commander, and then he was assistant center commander, and then I continued on or whatever. Mega center, he was an assistant. What I was always beating him, but then he ultimately beat me because when I was medically retired, he went on to become a first sergeant. Which pisses me off to like no end because that was like my goal. But he texted me and he said, "Hey, so how many people?" He's like, all he says is "question" on Facebook Messenger, and I go, "Yeah, what's up? We're recording, but what's up?" I'll answer your question. He goes, no, well, I'm not doing anything important. What's up? And he goes, how many people were at the Capitol riot? And I said, riot? You know, that's not what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, no, the get together. That's what I meant. But no, so, man, I don't know. The whole, I don't like the whole idea of predestination for that reason. It's a great gimmick for a story and for tying the hands of the protagonist and for like creating a, you know, for creating the path of the protagonist, which, you know, the protagonist is going to break free from, and he's going to go and do his own thing or whatever. You know, that's always the thing. And I want to thank you for spoiling the end of Loki for me. I do this hilarious thing where I'll watch up until the last episode, and I'll stop like at the second to last episode of a show. Oh. So I think I was at the second to last episode of Loki where they like where they were like, all right, well, now it's time to go to this cloud in the sky or whatever. And that was where I left off. And because my wife she does this funny thing where she like falls asleep whenever we watch a show, and then we'll watch the show and together, and she'll fall asleep with me, you know, holding her or whatever, and I'll finish watching the show because I so seldom have opportunities to watch shows that like I'll watch it because I'm like, hey, this is the only opportunity I'm going to be able to watch Dix, the TV show. So I'm going to watch
exactly.
it. And then she'll have to watch it the next day, and then we'll catch up and we'll talk about it. And you know, she'll interrupt me. She'll be like, "Hey, so what did you think about fucking Nate and banging Cassie or whatever?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's wild, it's crazy." Or what do you think about Loki and Homegirl meeting up or whatever? And I forget her name, but like other Loki or whatever. You know, like and them working together to go to the Cloud City, and you know, like that sort of shit. And that's our bonding, is like we get a chance to come together later after she's done at work and she's watched the show and I'm done with homework, and we can come together and talk about the shit. But I don't like the idea ever of my hands being tied. So in that way, I'm very much the protagonist of every show ever. And, you know, we see this sort of thing. There's like this art imitating life, life imitating art, where either art is all of a sudden, like you said, like where Loki is all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, your life is scripted. We know, like you're not doing anything new. Neo, when he shows up and there's like 16 other Neos and they're all like, bullshit, you know, that, that sort of stuff, you know, it's like a classic trope. I don't like that for that to be my life, and I like to break free of that, and probably that's the reason why I'm the way that I am, where I follow. By the way, welcome to the chat, Critter Me Timbers, which is what I was about to say. You know, probably why the same reason why I follow Critter Me Timbers so closely. Like, if anybody ever thinks that I have any original thought or anything, I can't imagine anybody would think that, but my original thought largely comes from like shit that I steal from Critter Me Timbers. She posts a lot of like anti government type shit, like very like, hey, think for yourselves, use your fucking brain. You know, she posts a lot of that stuff, and that's where a lot of the memes that I get, I look at her stuff and I'm like, that's what shapes my mental opinion. I'm like, what would Critter Me Timbers do in this situation, right? So anytime I feel like my hands are tied or my path is laid out before me, I think, what would Critter Me Timbers do? I think, what have I learned from the memes put forth by Critter Me Timbers? What have I learned? What can I do as a human being that I can shape my own path, that I can carve my own path? What can I do? And a lot of times that's what it takes, and what I would encourage a lot of you to do, because a lot of us, whether we like it or not, we're kind of like following that path that is laid out before us, and we think, hey, maybe we're doing our own thing, but are you really bucking the system? Are you really resisting? Are you really doing anything are you going against the path that was laid out before you? Are you breaking the are you conditioning? Are you pathfinding yourself, or are you following the conditioning, like you said? Are you going off the beaten path? Are you doing your own thing, or are you just a carbon copy cutout Like V used to have a thing. I forget what he always used to say. I used to have to have him remind me, like the carbon copy, monotonous, whatever the fuck it was. But like, you know, a Xerox copy of everybody else. Like, are you doing what everybody else is doing? And even to a certain degree, a lot of us, there aren't a lot of us, but like, are the people, when you look around in our tight-knit group, are you doing just kind of what everybody else is doing, or are you kind of chiseling your own path? And are you creating a path for others who maybe are too, too nervous to break away from that? There are a lot of people, and I'm not picking on anybody in the chat, who had to get vaccinated for their job to provide for their family. There are a lot of people who had to wear masks to provide for their family. There are people who had to make certain decisions. And we sit here and we talk a lot of shit. Today, I went to an orientation for this job. I wore a fucking mask the whole day. Like a big fucking coward, okay? And I talk a lot of shit for somebody who today went to an orientation and wore a mask for like 2 hours for this orientation. So I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to say, oh, mostly wave, fuck you for wearing a mask. I'm not going to say, hey, Mike, you motherfucker, I know that you were, you did. I don't know. I know Mike's not vaccinated because he's a shit. And Mike is kind of like he's like a god amongst you had me at Bigfoot fans. Hey, Chris Rose, I know you had to do some shit that you probably like wouldn't admit gladly to the group here. Hey, Jimmy, I know that your ass did such and such, or, I'm not going to dime anybody out or anything. And I know, I wouldn't say anything, but, I know we've had to make some, we talk a lot of shit for people who had to do some shit that we probably said that, we would never do. Right? Just because at the end of the day, we have families, we have to provide for our families, and we make certain accommodations. Some of us have been like very like stern about I'll never get the fucking vaccine. And we never got the vaccine. But then some of us who are like, if you wear a mask, you're a fucking faggot. And then like today I go and I wear a mask right? for 2 hours because I showed up. I didn't wear a mask. I made my appearance known. Hey, I'm not a mask wearing guy. Once we all sat down, I'm like, okay, pulled the mask out of my pocket and I put it on, right? Just out of respect. Okay. Because I'm like, hey, I'm the only guy in here who's not wearing a mask. I've made it clear that I'm the guy who doesn't wear a mask, but I'll wear a mask just so that we can move forward with the day. Like that's the sort of thing. Are you out there blazing the path for other people to follow? Are you willing to, I'm not going to go and I'm not going to murder somebody, right? Because that's like in a society, we have to fulfill certain societal norms. Like I'm not going to murder somebody, right? Okay. But if somebody presents themselves in a fucked up way, am I going to make it very clear that I'll break their fucking neck in front of their family, in front of their own mother, if I feel like I need to? Yeah, oh yeah. I'll make that appearance. I'll make that clear to anybody. And people tend to respect that. They'll be like, okay, well, this is a guy who will break my fucking neck in front of my own mother. As long as they know and as long as I've created that image, I'm okay with at that point not breaking that person's neck in front of their own mother. You know what I'm saying?
See. Sure.
So that's the sort of thing. I don't know how we got onto that topic, but I will say it's okay for you guys. Hey, if you got to throw on a mask, don't feel bad about it or whatever.
Yes, I will say, and I want to reiterate also that if Tom can, fuck, I was gonna
do it, Jerry.
All right, you said it yourself. I want to remind you of that before I do this. If Tom can be an open faggot for 2 hours, so can you.
Yeah, I did. I made it very clear that I was a faggot for 2 hours. I was a total faggot for 2 hours.
I heard you say it, and I was like, I have to bring this back. I have to bring it back, Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to let him say his piece, but I have to be able to end this with, so now, kids,
huge fag.
Be a fag like Tom for a couple hours.
Let me tell you a funny story real quick, and then we'll move on with the actual topic of discussion. I was telling my kids the other day, I actually told my middle son, he's so like indoctrinated by me, which I feel bad about because I don't ever want my kids to feel like they are indoctrinated. I want them to feel like they made a decision based off of the values that I provided for them. And my middle son, he was sitting in the passenger seat while we were driving. We're picking up food. And I was talking about my intro to religion class and how I was going to I had gotten approval from my professor to interview and attend the services of Scientologists. And I said something about religion, intro to world religion. My middle son, very smart kid, but very quiet. Like, he's the black sheep of my family. Not at all like, he's more like me than he is of my wife, which makes him the black sheep. But he said, "What's a religion?" He didn't know. And so I had to explain to him. I was like, "Well, what's your religion?" And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "Okay, well, so what church do we go to?" And so he kind of like, we talked it out that way. But he said, "Okay, so that's a religion." And where was I going with that? I don't remember. I know I've had too much to drink at this point when when I struggle to remember. You said something about
being a faggot.
And having to make accommodations, the mask, the Scientology, the religion. That's right. That's where I was going. As I started talking about, I knew there was a place that I was going with it. As I was talking about how they did that satanic after-school class in Lebanon or Milford, Ohio, not too far away from me, like less than an hour away. And I had made the comment about how if they're going to do a satanic temple class after school or after school thing, I should be able to make an anti-gay or anti-LGBT group after school. And somebody told me I couldn't because that's a hate group and hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment. And I said, au contraire. And I explained to them, I'm like, no. Hate groups are acceptable. Hate speech is covered by the First Amendment. It has been made clear multiple times. Here's the most recent time in 2017, blah, 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 blah. And we go on. Welcome to the chat, by the way, Don. He says, got thrown out, or he says, masks are a religion. So he's on the same, and I know he's on the same page as we are with all this stuff. But I said that this whole satanic temple thing, and religion and him not knowing what religion he was and all that sort of stuff. You can't go around, and hate speech is legal, but I wouldn't, because you teach your kids these things and you have to kind of like tread a very thin line. And you'll learn this, Jerry, young dad. You'll learn that you have to walk this very fine line of like, hey, this is what we believe and this is what the world accepts. And in order for you to exist in this world, while adhering to our values, but also not being completely ostracized from the world, you have to walk this very fine line. So I said, hate speech is constitutionally protected. Now, I hope that you guys will all forgive me because I'm about to say some slurs that I said to my own kids. So know that it's not that I'm saying this behind their back or whatever. This is something that I said to my own kids for the purpose of learning and education. Is I said, hate speech is protected. Now, you cannot walk around calling everyone a faggot or a nigger because you will be ostracized from society. Real quick. Like, quicker than you will ever be able to understand. Like, you will just immediately be written off by society at large by saying either one of those words at this point. Now, I don't say the N-word in front of my kids, like, ever. I think that's probably one of 2 times I've ever said it. And it was never out of hate. It was out of education. Not because, like, I think words matter, but because I think it's important that we don't teach our kids to hate for any particular, just for random reasons. Like, hey, don't go out and just be hateful for the sake of being hateful, but understand that this sort of hateful rhetoric exists. So for that reason, they know, they've heard me say that word. But faggot, I say it all the time. I say faggot all the I say it like it's my job. Like if I say it, like if I keep saying it, I'm gonna win something. Okay. And they've heard me say it, but I've also explained to them, hey man, you can't say that word because it's a different time now than it was when I was growing up. When the word faggot, when we would call our friends fags, I still call my friends fags, like most of the time. If I haven't called you a fag for one reason or another, it's probably because I don't like you. It's just become
you're just not that close.
It's a word that we used as people our age to describe one another, like, hey, come on, don't be a fag. Let's go. And it just, if you don't say it, it's because you don't trust that person, right? So when they heard me say that the other day, I said, you can't just go around calling people faggots or niggers or whatever. My middle son, bless him, he says, "Ya think?" Like in classic 1990s sitcom fashion, he goes, "You think?" And so like that's how I kind of knew that I had raised my kids right, because they knew that those words, you're not allowed to say those words, but at the same time, right, words are kind of meaningless, like when behind closed doors. Like, who cares? If I say the N-word and I'm talking about like you, Jerry, like if I call you that, like it doesn't mean anything, right? But if I go out and I specifically hard R somebody who is black, that's designed intentionally to be offensive and kind of shitty. And quite frankly, I think anybody who refers to a black person as that is somebody who is like probably not educated, right? But that's just my opinion. I think there are like plenty of other things that you can say about somebody based on their, I think you can attack people more accurately based on their own lifestyles or like who they are as a person than based on their race. And if you can do it with any other word other than the N-word. But Jerry, go ahead.
Dude, yeah, well, I mean, we've spent the better part of the first half of this show talking about all the ways you can like just completely discriminate against someone. For example, I want to reiterate, I don't care how pretty you are, if you don't take care of your teeth and your gums are larger than your teeth,
or your toes.
And your toes look like, oh dude, can I just say this, by the way, and this goes out again to Stephicus. She had admitted that 90 Day Fiance was a guilty pleasure of hers. Well, there's this one that my wife is watching now, and there's a little person, a midget, a dwarf, whatever they refer to themselves as.
You can't say little person.
Which one? I don't know which one can't I say? I don't even know which one.
You can't call them Oompa Loompas.
I see.
That's like the only definitive one you can't call them.
Oh, okay, good. Well, these these dwarfy midget, I know.
These faggots.
These homo hobbits. No. So this woman, her hands, right? Her fingers look like toes. Toe fingers. And look, man, I try to be fair to anybody. I have my imperfections also. Maybe they're not as readily apparent as toe fingers, but if you look hard enough, you will find them. You know what I mean? But I'm not sure where I'm going with that. I guess I just really wanted to bring up the fact that there are people out there with toe fingers, Tom.
Yeah. You know what those people are? Is when they were doing their character select design, they put fingers at 0, and like the default was just to make them toes because, like the default is feet, right?
I guess my point was you could make fun of them for having toe fingers. You don't have to call them a midget, right?
Yeah.
So you could just. So there you go.
Where are we at on 238? So I remember where to come for your quote for this week's episode. You don't have to call them toe fingers, but just as long as
you can make fun of them for their toe fingers. You don't have to call them a midget.
Daywalker. I love Don Trout's comment about the daywalker.
Well, that's me. He's referring to me.
Yeah,
he knows
your gingerness.
Yes.
That's what we call gingers, right? I'm like very fortunate because I'm like the gray area, right? The Nazis weren't thrilled with me because I'm brown hair, brown eyes, brown beard, right? Like I have enough German in me where they're like neutral, right? And they're just like, we'll just not focus on him yet. But like if things get real tight, maybe we'll focus on the brown hair, brown eyes. But like,
I gotta 1 second. I'll be right back.
Yeah, do what you got to do. I'm gonna keep talking shit about you.
All right.
But while Jerry's gone, we're gonna go ahead and jump right into the episode real quick. So what we're talking about is the Fermi Paradox, and this is something that struck me as fascinating because I was looking for the next topic, and the Fermi Paradox kind of struck out because this is something I've been aware of. This show it used to be about aliens. In fact, our first episode was about aliens, and we don't really talk about aliens all that often. And with all the UAP well, I'm sorry, I don't want to say that'd be like saying the ATM machine, but the unidentified aerial phenomenon that we've seen lately, and might I add that the government having to change it from UFO, unidentified flying object, which is what it was since we were born, until now, having to change it to UAP is classic like public affairs nonsense where they say, hey, we can't admit that the conspiracy theorists who were talking about UFOs were right, so we're going to have to change it to UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, which we're totally okay with because we're like, hey, at least you're acknowledging what we've been talking about all this time. With all the UAP stuff that's going on right now, UAP, UFO, depending on what generation you're from, with all that's going on right now, there's some discussion that needs to be had about the Fermi Paradox. Now, the Fermi Paradox dates all the way back to the 1950s, when Enrico Fermi, his name was associated with it because while he and his physicist friends were out talking, they were talking about the uptick in UFO phenomenon and sightings. All of a sudden, they were talking about it, and they were saying, hey, there's something to this. We need to deal with this, whatever. They're going out to lunch. In the middle of lunch, Enrico Fermi has shut his mouth for the whole time. In the middle of lunch, he, like, outbursts, and he says, but where is everybody? Okay, if these if aliens are real, you know, they're kind of, like, cutting it up, laughing about it. He says, okay, if UFOs are real, where is everybody? And that's what started. He died 4 years later, but in that time, Enrico Fermi had introduced this idea that we need to figure out mathematically how do we figure out where everybody is in the universe? The universe is pretty big, and he was a physicist, which there were some subsections of physics, which included astrophysics, that kind of addressed like the universe as a whole. And mathematically, he wanted to figure out where everybody was in the universe. And so what we've done this week is we've kind of introduced, what we want to do is we want to introduce the Fermi Paradox, since we're already over on time and we're trying to keep this under 3 hours. We want to talk about what the Fermi Paradox is, and then in the upcoming weeks, we're going to kind of break down, because the Fermi Paradox is huge. It's this massive concept of like, that includes the great filters, it includes solutions to the Fermi Paradox, it includes like where the aliens are, the answers, and all that stuff. Very exciting stuff that we need to know, especially those of us who maybe are kind of like aware of the goings on of the UAP and the UFO concepts. We're kind of aware of it, but we also don't know kind of like the origins of it. So what we hope to do in the coming weeks is kind of talk about the Fermi Paradox, so that those of us who don't have an in-depth understanding, we can kind of like follow along with what's going on and what's happening with the UFOs and the UAPs. So, for instance, to give you just a real quick down and dirty version of what the Fermi Paradox is, there's an estimated. Enrico Fermi came back like after his whole thing of saying, well, where is everybody? He came back with this proposal of what needs to be considered as part of this Fermi paradox. He said that there are an estimated 200 to 400 billion stars in the Milky Way and 70 sextillion, nice. It would have been nicer if it was 69, right? 69 sextillion in the observable universe. Now, even if intelligent life occurs on only a minuscule percentage of planets around these stars, there might still be a great number of extant civilizations, and the percentage were high enough, and if the percentage were high enough, it would produce a significant number of extant civilizations in the Milky Way. Now, this assumes the mediocrity principle, by which Earth is a typical planet. Now, for those of you, and I know some of you are going to, like, after this episode, you're going to look up, okay, well, let me kind of, like, better understand what the Fermi paradox is. And he said this term, mediocrity principle, this is a philosophical term, which means if an item is drawn at random from one of several sets of categories, it's likelier to come from the most numerous category than from one of less numerous categories. Okay, so it's kind of like the what the heck is it called? Occam's razor. So, like, whichever one is most numerous, that's probably what it is. Okay, it makes the most sense that that's what it is. So specifically in this case, there's nothing particularly unusual about the evolution of the solar system, of our solar system. That's kind of where it gets a little bit weird, right? I want to make sure that I address this. Don Trout says, what about the times my XO said you didn't see anything, but it's ours? I assume Don Trout, military, what branch? You'll have to tell me, Jerry.
Army.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So, if you're a commissioned officer and you're listening to this, or you were friends with commissioned officers, you probably know more than most people do, but you're not allowed to say it. Okay. And that's what's fucked up about that. And I hate to say this, is like, if you know about something, you're not allowed to tell anybody about it. And you are regularly consulted. Like, you're regularly tested to make sure that you didn't tell any about it. So if the XO says that you didn't see anything, but it's ours, that's your XO's way of saying, hey, there's something out there that you're not supposed to have seen, but don't worry about it. And I can't talk about it any further, but I know more. So if you want to know more, just know that there's more, but I can't tell you about it because I'm going to eventually be asked about this on a lie detector test, and I can't talk about it further. Okay. I unfortunately, like, I have friends who were in that position, but they were not able to tell me, and I had to respect their position for that reason, because I knew that they knew something that I wasn't allowed to know. Which is the same reason, like, when people are like, well, what do you, like, theologically, when we talk about such and such, how is it that God, or how is it that this exists, God knows about it, and we don't know about it? I'm like, well, we're not allowed to know about it, you know, like, or God knows about it, we're not allowed to know about it, and that's that. And I accept that. I accept the fact that my lieutenant friend, who had significantly less military experience than me, knew about something that I would like to know about. I understood that he knew about something that I couldn't know about, and I had to respect that. I had no choice to, but just to protect his career. But anyways, I digress. Make sure we were getting back at okay, so this is where it gets weird, right? A lot of people, and I myself included, up until somewhat recently, I didn't really know the structure of the universe. Like, we're so very used to our pocket of the world, of a solar system, of a galaxy, of a universe. Like, we don't necessarily think about the universe or even the galaxy at large, or even the solar system really at large. I found a picture, Jerry, and I hope that you can appreciate this one. This is because I always imagined, even though I knew that it probably wasn't the case, I learned that, or I guess I always assumed the solar system was kind of static to some degree. You know, you always imagine the sun, and then you imagine Mercury, then you imagine Venus, then you imagine Earth, then you imagine Mars, and then Jupiter, and then Saturn, and so on and so forth. You imagine it in kind of a static position from a solar system perspective, because we as humans typically kind of like, we can appreciate the next level above us, right? But not above that. And even as students, like grade school students, when we learn about the solar system, we learn about it in that way, in kind of a static, you know, my very intelligent or my very elegant mother just sent whatever, you know, whatever the mnemonic device is. We learn that, and it's kind of like a static model of the solar system. What we don't know, or what we don't necessarily recall in every circumstance, is that the solar system is whipping through the galaxy at like incredible speeds, and the galaxy itself is whipping through the universe at incredible speeds, and we're all kind of orbiting around this great attractor. We are orbiting around the sun is orbiting around the galaxy is orbiting around our local group is orbiting around the universe, or whatever. Very complex universe. And I saw something recently that reminded me of how complex we are. If you think that the solar system is static, this is actually what the solar system looks like as it's whipping through the universe, right? The sun is orbiting its next higher gravitational object, which is not even the galaxy. It's actually the arm within the galaxy, okay? So let me see if I can show you an example. You see how the sun is whipping and how we're whipping around the sun kind of in the fucked up tubular way that we are. You can see here in the galaxy, there's this great attractor in the center of our galaxy. And you see these arms that are wrapped around, kind of creating this orbital pattern. You don't have to pay much attention to the writing. You can if you're interested, if you want to pause it or whatever and check it out. But you can see these arms that are branching out kind of in a circular motion around the galaxy. We are a part of that, right? You can see where it points out to the sun and planets have originated closer to the center of the galaxy, and we've kind of worked our way outside of the galaxy, but we're part of this arm. The sun is not orbiting around the galaxy. The sun is orbiting around one of those spirals around the galaxy. Now the spiral is orbiting around the galaxy. So like, when you think, now this is what I want to drive home to you guys. If you guys, I know we all understand the universe is fucking massive. It's huge. And that the galaxy in itself is huge. And even the solar system is huge. But if you like start to think about it, you have to appreciate that. Let me bump back to this picture here. When people start talking about how, hey, how come this other planet that is hosting is habitable to its closest star, how come it hasn't come and visited us? Because we haven't passed it, right? In 225 million years, the sun, our sun, orbits the galaxy, that center object, that bright center object in this image. It orbits that every 225 to 250 million years. Okay? So if you're like, well, surely something, I don't know, we pass the sun every year, and we cross paths with Jupiter to where we can see Jupiter every X amount of months or every X years. We see those things in the night sky. The chance that you're seeing another habitable planet within our own galaxy at any given time in your lifetime or the lifetime of anyone you've ever heard of is pretty fucking small. Okay? Statistically. And that's the point I want to make before we move on. A lot of people talk about, well, how come you're going to hear a lot of stuff about the universe, or about how Fermi's paradox is explainable, and reasons for this explanation about how, like, other civilizations perhaps are aware of us, the dark forest theory, or you're going to hear about other stuff and you're going to be like, well, how come they haven't reached out to us? And that seems pretty silly that they would think such and such. But the fact of the matter is we just may not have crossed their paths yet, because of how big our galaxy is. And, I know as a kid, my dad would talk about the Milky Way galaxy. He's like, hey, we live in the Milky Way galaxy. This is how my dad, he was a theologian. He was a Methodist preacher, but he understood how science operated, right? A lot of people want to talk shit about pastors and about theologians, but he understood. He's like, hey man, we're part of this Milky Way galaxy. But that's the extent of the conversation I think that we had. And I assumed that the galaxy was much smaller than it really is. But once you start looking into how big the galaxy really is, you're going to be like, wow, holy shit. Okay, well, now I get why aliens, assuming they exist, if they exist, I assume that they exist, I now get why perhaps they haven't ever, why they haven't ever come and talked to us or whatever. Now, the other situation, the other part of the Fermi Paradox that I want to mention is that given intelligent life's ability to overcome scarcity and its tendency to colonize new habitats, it seems possible that at least some civilizations would be technologically advanced, seek out new resources in space, and colonize their own star systems and subsequently surrounding star systems. But since there is no significant evidence on Earth or elsewhere in the known universe of other intelligent life after 13.8 billion years of the universe's history, there is a conflict requiring a resolution, right? So 13.8 billion years is a long fucking time. Like, it's the longest time that you'll ever recognize, because that's how long the universe has supposedly existed, based on the theory of the Big Bang and evolution and all that. That's when the universe came to exist. So it's literally the longest time that anyone can fathom. And since there is no evidence of anything in the universe in that amount of time, that tells us that there's nothing out there. Jerry, what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, okay. So the first part where you said that we just haven't gotten there yet kind of makes some sense. And I think Don also has a point that if they find out what fried chicken is and they know that we have it, that there will be an intergalactic war, the likes of which we haven't seen since, of course, the major motion picture documentary Independence Day, as well as its sequel Independence Day 2, The Search for More Money. So that I could certainly say is a reasonable thing. Yeah, I guess the whole thing, honestly, some of this kind of goes above my head. I'm like, all right, well, there's possibly some aliens out there, and they don't come here because they don't know we're here, or, we kind of suck and don't go near them because we're flying really fast, but not fast enough to have been there yet. And it's as long as anybody could possibly fathom, but it's not good. I don't know. It just seems like what I want to know is, if they've never been here, then how did all these people completely come up with the same stories about abductions and stuff without, like, the internet? Like all those people who, before the internet, some guy in the middle of the woods somewhere, or some lady in an apartment somewhere. By the way, does anybody here, do you guys actually believe that aliens have come to Earth? I mean, we're talking about this, but I haven't heard anybody say whether or not they believe one way or the other. All I know is that when I watched Unsolved Mysteries when I was a kid, the UFO abduction episodes scared the shit out of me. And since that day, I've believed that there's an absolute possibility that shit is happening and has happened. Mostly because Robert Stack is very, very, very like intense. You know what I mean?
Can I say this, Jerry? I thought
Yes.
Robert Stack was now when Saw 1 came out, I was
Mm-hmm.
like 18 or 19 years old. I had just gotten back. I was 19 because, or I guess it was 18 or 19 because I was in Iraq when it came out, and I saw a bootleg copy of it that was sold at the bazaar. And I thought Robert Stack was the guy who played Jigsaw, right?
Oh.
And this is
Wow.
before. Now, a lot of people won't appreciate this. A lot of you young bucks. I know Don Trout. I know that you. He's like one of the few guys who are in our fandom who will probably appreciate this. But there was a time you couldn't just type into Google, and you couldn't find the answer to shit. And like IMDb was not a thing. So when you didn't know, like you grew up watching Unsolved Mysteries, you saw the host, and
Mm-hmm.
then Saw came out, you saw the guy, and you're like, well, that guy kind of looks like him, and like in your head, you start to think, well, that's the same guy, and I remember that was like right around the time of the shift from like the internet didn't exist or it wasn't useful to the time that it was useful.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there was a period of time, and I'm sure you remember this, it's like 2004 to 2007, in that time frame, where the internet wasn't really particularly useful, and you still kind of had to lean on your friends to know things, or you had to like read magazines to know things. um like that was a period of time. I thought that the guy from Saw was the guy from Unsolved Mysteries. I really did for a long time. And I think a lot of people, people who grew up in the '90s, kids especially, '80s, '90s kids will appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about the Drake equation. Okay, um, I want to make sure. Okay, we have about 13 more minutes. I'm really trying to power this out because I have some really interesting stuff that I want to make sure you guys have before we go into the episode next week, where we start talking about, why the fucking Fermi paradox isn't, like you can't take it seriously. Um, it's theorized that it would only take 5 million to 50 million years to colonize the galaxy. Now, here's one thing I had a hard time wrapping my head around is you have to stop thinking about uh, time as we know it, okay? And you have to start thinking of time as
As
astronomical time, right? Yeah.
time as a ghost with a very long story to tell.
Right. Somebody who wants to tell you the story about the DMV visit that they made back in 1987. Like, not like too long ago, but like long enough ago to where you don't care. Yeah, you're like, come on, let's wrap it up. 5 million to 50 million years astronomically is not that long a time. So, like, I know when you hear 5 to 50 million, you're like, holy shit, that's a long time. It's not really. Like, in the idea, it's like if you ascribe to the idea of the Big Bang and that sort of thing, it's really not that long at all, because you got to remember that the universe is what, like, gosh. Okay, so the Milky Way galaxy is 13.61 billion years old. And the universe itself is only 13.8 billion years. So, like, when you start looking at 5 million to 50 million years, that's like pocket change, right? Now, the Drake equation, this is kind of like, this applies to the Fermi paradox, because, like, 11 years after Fermi said, hey, well, where is everybody? This dude, his last name was Drake. I don't remember his first name. I wish I would have written it down. I did write it down. Frank Drake. He wanted to come up with like because these nerds, they always want to do math problems. They said he said there's a formula for determining the likelihood of existence of aliens, right? And this has become like the gold standard, okay, for determining whether or not aliens exist, and it's closely associated with the Fermi paradox. So he said that the number of technologically advanced civilizations in the Milky Way equals n equals the rate of formation of stars in the galaxy, of which there are 100,000 million stars, times the fraction of those stars with planetary systems, there are 3,200 stars with planets orbiting them, times the number of planets per solar system with an environment suitable for organic life. In this galaxy alone, there are 40 billion Earth-sized planets orbiting habitable zones in sun-like stars and red dwarfs. 11 billion specifically orbiting sun-like stars, ones that are identical to ours, times the fraction of those suitable planets whereon organic life actually appears, times the fraction of civilizations that reach the technological level whereby detectable signals may be dispatched, times the length of time that those civilizations dispatch their signals. Now the last four, this is where it gets all fucked up. The last four variables, we don't know. We can't know. Okay? So, like, I don't know how many of you have taken any kind of math classes. I assume all of you have taken some math classes. When you did a problem, you were presented with X equals, and then they would give you the information you need, right? And you would solve for X, right? That was just like the norm, okay? Mm-hmm. Even in the more advanced ones, you were given enough information to where you could still solve for X. That is not the case here. This dude presented a thing where like half the numbers you just don't have, nor do you have any way of obtaining them. And this is the Drake equation. Literally half of the numbers that he wants you to solve, we don't have, nor do we have. So like number of planets with life, number of planets that have been emitting radio frequencies, number of planets that have been actively seeking for us. Let me see how long they've been doing so. This sort of shit that is like very, there's just no way that we would know. However, the very first meeting of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial life, or extraterrestrial intelligence, they found that there were roughly, and I don't know how they found this, because it included this guy, Drake, as well as Carl Sagan, who, like, anybody who knows anything about aliens and the occult and all that sort of stuff, we know who Carl Sagan is. They were able to determine that between 1,000 and 100, it's stupid. It's so dumb. I can't believe I'm having to say this. Because it's such a terrible range. Anywhere between 1,000 and 100 million civilizations in the Milky Way fit that criteria. Okay, so it could be any number between those numbers. Which is kind of like saying, I'm reminded of this like skit that I saw one time where they were like, oh, well, I've been hit by, it was like a midget and he was talking. And he was like, I've been hit by cars somewhere between 10 and 1,000 times. You know, the dude was like, well, that's a terrible span. Like, you got to give me something better to work with, right? You know, so like when they say between 1,000 and 100 million, I'm like, I can't really work with that, Carl Sagan. I can't really work with that, Frank Drake, right? And some other stuff that you need to know for those of you who, and I know a lot of our people in the audience, there's a lot of us who are like creation theory guys who think that the universe is, 5,000 years old. Anywhere from 5 to 7,000 years old. And then some of us who think that the universe is 13.8 billion years old. And both are kind of like, they fit that criteria. We're going to pretend like, let's just go with the number of the 13.8 billion years for the sake of scientific numbers. The nearest habitable planet is 4.24 light years away, Proxima b. And even if we used our fastest probe, which is New Horizons, to get to Proxima b, it would take over 26 million years to reach it, based on the expansion of the universe, and the continuing expansion of the universe based on the origins of the universe being 13.8 billion years ago. It takes 225 to 250 million years for our solar system to orbit the galaxy. The speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second, which means that 1 light year, being how far that light will travel in 1 year, is 5.879 trillion miles. The Milky Way is about 100,000 light years across, which means if we were to like somehow zip across the universe or across the galaxy to where like we could be from here to there, I mean, you're looking at that's how long it takes from, I don't know, if we were to flick on a light here that was visible from that distance, it would still take 100,000 years for something across our own galaxy for them to see it. So like way beyond how long it would take for us to exist, right? So when you try to imagine the life of man, or the life of humanity for that matter, to the distance across our own galaxy, it's unfathomable. And I want you to remember that when you think about, hey, how come aliens haven't visited us? You know, like, even if we have an alien within our galaxy, even if he is in our galaxy, it's very possible they're just over there living their own best lives, not even thinking about the possibility of life. They may be so new that they don't even recognize the probability. They may still think that they are the center of the universe. Or if you're like us and you think that the Earth is flat and that the sun and the moon are, you know, fixed in the sky. Oh man, which, you know, Dave would have you to believe. The observable universe is 93 billion light years across. Now, I do have a picture that I want to show. There are some pictures of the observable universe that I think were fascinating that I wanted to address. Let's see here. This right here is actually a computer simulated image of an area of space more than 50 million light years across, presenting a possible large-scale distribution of light sources in the universe. Precise relative contributions of galaxies and quasars are unclear. So if you want to know what like science thinks the universe looks like, this is kind of it right here. And furthermore, this right here, you've probably seen this image. This is a image from the Hubble telescope of galaxies in the night sky. It's such a small portion of the night sky. I was unable to capture that portion of the image, but it's a let's see, Hubble ultra deep field image of a region of the observable universe equivalent to the sky area shown. Like, if you look up in the night sky, this is kind of like how many galaxies are within that field of view. Every single light that you're seeing here in this image is a galaxy. The lights from the smallest, and some of them are from like 14 billion years ago. So if ever you want to know how small we are and how far away other shit is in the universe, this is it.
That is, yeah, that's that is a really great way to be like, yeah, I think, yeah, it's just, I guess it's just, it takes your mind.
Does that make you feel small, Jerry?
Yeah, it does. I'm trying to come up with a better way to say it, because you did, and I'm like, yeah, I'm looking at that going, okay, so. Anybody else wonder why our problems don't mean a damn? You know, that kind of thing. It's like, holy shit, man.
Can you imagine?
Our whole, yeah, just the whole planet would be gone, and none of those people even know, or people, whatever. Nobody, like, if there's anybody out there, they're just like, what was that? Did you hear that? I didn't hear anything. You know.
I heard an interesting thing as I was looking at some of this stuff. we talked briefly about the Eternals, right? You talked about it, and I know you had certain opinions about it. And I've watched it, and I didn't think much more of it than Mike says he can see his house from that Hubble telescope picture. We all know Mike is well-to-do. He makes more than we do. So he's got a very fancy house that is visible from the Hubble telescope. But I was reading something about how these Type 3 civilizations, which we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes, these Type 3 civilizations, they just don't care about these small-scale civilizations, much in the same way that we don't care about ant colonies, right? We might be like, oh wow, these ants make a very elaborate home. They make these really cool ant colonies, but you can kick an ant colony and not think anything about it. You might even forget about it before you're 10 feet away, right? You don't care, because it's like these things don't matter in the grand scheme of things, right? These Type 3 civilizations are so far advanced from us. If they looked at us as they're going on about their business and they see us as a source of natural resources, they see us and they wipe us out thinking, oh, these monkeys make really interesting homes. Oh, well. And then they like wipe us out. It's the same as we treat an ant colony. And we would have no idea, because these gigantic Type 3 civilizations are so big, they're so advanced, that by the time they reach us, it's too late for us to do anything. And we might be freaking out like, oh, don't do this. They won't hear us. They don't care. They're just moving on about their way throughout the universe, much in the same way that we move about our day. And we might not even notice the ant colony that we just stepped on. So it's pretty wild, and it should put things in perspective for you, seeing some of this like imagery of what we see in space. It should put some things in perspective. And I'll tell you what, and this is not to toot my own horn, but as I see, like, the more I see this sort of stuff, the more I'm like, I need to be nicer to animals, right? We're getting into falconry, we're getting into that sort of stuff. I appreciate the animal kingdom on a much larger scale than I did 10 years ago. I might have seen a bird and been like, fuck birds. Who cares? There's birds. Who cares? Whatever. Get out of here, bird. But now I see birds. I'm like, well, you're an intricate part of our ecosystem. And what you eat is an intricate part of our ecosystem as well. But in order for us to maintain this equilibrium, we need to make sure that you are not exceeding what you should eat. And we need to make sure that you do exceed like the lower levels of what you're supposed to eat. Or we need to make sure that you're contributing to what you're supposed to eat. So I, as an aspiring falconer, need to appreciate that you need to go out there and you need to eat rabbits. You need to go out there and you need to eat mice. You need to go out there and eat snakes. And I need to make sure that you get out there and do that, because otherwise I am throwing off the equilibrium of the universe just by my interference in the ecosystem. So it's really wild to me when I start reading this sort of stuff and I realize, like, I need to not step on that anthill, or I need to be mindful of where I'm walking, because I might step on something that provides a valuable resource. Because what if this Galactus, or what the hell are the Celestials? What if a Celestial just breezed by my planet and used me as like a resource or whatever? I would rather that not be the case. So I should also be mindful of these ant colonies. Jerry, what do you have to say about anything that we've said before you take off?
Well, essentially, we are really small, but we're also not small compared to each other, right? So, like, if someone says, "Hey, man, you got huge Tom Miller like huge ding dong," well, don't take that as like, hey, compared to the size of the universe, that's not fair. You got to make sure your size comparisons are proportionate. Hey, man, yeah, I may have a problem right now, and people are pointing you to the sky like a bunch of assholes and be like, look at how much is out there. What does your problems mean? Well, it means exactly what I just said, except I have one less friend to have a problem with because you're an asshole who just tried to make me feel like my problems aren't nothing by pointing at the sky with a lot of stuff. Look, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of people. We ran out of gas. But you know what? We're here hanging out. So when we're talking, respect that that's how it is, in spite of the fact that we're basically barreling through space and no one's coming to hang out and tell us how to put the brakes on or fix our problems. So, hey, let's just hope that you walk around with a big ding dong or something else really cool about you. And that matters on this planet, my friend. That's it.
If you didn't start off your character creation screen with a 10 on dick, then you're in big trouble, mister.
That's it. It's still, still the planet where that matters,
Here's the thing. I can't stress this enough. When you go to the vet and somebody writes, somebody draws a heart on your little appointment card, you need to be thinking about, like, what were they doing, and maybe that person has some daddy issues. No, it doesn't make sense to worry about these. We see these things in, like, kind of like a bubble, right? We watch movies like Eternals, and we see these things as, like, existing as, like, these are existential threats that we need to worry about. We need to worry about the Thanos snap. We need to worry about blah. We need to worry about that. Who cares? Do your best to be the person that you were put on this earth to be. Be kind. Don't be a shitty person. Like I said, like, if your New Year's resolution was to just kind of be kinder to people and compliment people, that's been a thing that I've been trying to do, is, like, instead of, because I've been hypercritical with people. I know you guys don't believe this, but I've been hypercritical with people over the past
I can't believe
36 years now. I've been quick to judge. I've been hurtful. I've said some hurtful things. But I don't need to be. And I shouldn't be. And I don't know how many people I've hurt in the past. And I don't know the impact that I've had by just being a shitty person. And so lately I've been doing a thing where if I've complimented you, it's not that I'm not being genuine. It's that I'm being, I'm trying to, hey, I need to recognize your positives, more so than your negatives. So when I say, hey, I dig your hair. I think your hair looks cool. Like, if I don't know if you put a lot of time and effort into your hair, but I look at somebody and I see that their hair looks cool. I'm like, hey man, your hair looks really cool today. Or, hey, I like your shirt. Like, where'd you get that shirt? That's a really cool shirt. I'm jealous. I wish I could pull that sort of shirt off. I wish I was in better shape. Like, what do you work out to get that particular, like, what is your workout routine? Like, I would love to hear more about that, because you look good. You look like you're a healthy person. What are you eating? Like, say something nice to somebody when you see them, instead of, like, because we're so quick. I'm guilty of it too. I'm quick to notice the negatives about people. I'm quick to notice the negatives about myself. If you see somebody and something jumps out at you as, like, look at this fucking dork, because that's instinctively